Right, good morning to you all. This is the meeting of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel, which has been held at the Council Chamber, County Hall at Usk, 22nd of December 2017. We start at 10 o'clock. Before we start, could we ask the Police Commissioner and his staff to introduce themselves so that the people watching us know exactly who's present. Would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Sean Curley, Commissioner's Chief of Staff.
Darren Garwood-Pask, Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer.
Julian Williams. Sorry, Pam, go.
Good morning, Pam Kelly, recently appointed Deputy Chief Constable.
Julian Williams, Chief Constable.
The panel, if they introduce themselves, please, from Peter's side.
Peter Nuttall, co-opted member.
Jill Howells, co-opted member.
Kath Forbes-Thompson, lead officer to the panel.
Councillor John Guy, Chairman.
Councillor William Routley.
Councillor Jason Jordan.
Councillor Peter Clark from Monmouthshire.
And Councillor Tony Eason from Monmouthshire.
Councillor Stuart Healy, Blaina Gwent.
Councillor Chris Forehead, Caerphilly.
Colin Mann, Caerphilly, County Borough.
Thank you very much. If we now move to the agenda, first of all, declarations of interest. Are there any other declarations of interest other than what has been recorded previously? We have those previous declarations recorded, so that's in hand. Item 2, apologies for absence.
Councillor Lisa Winnett, please.
And Councillor Jez Kirby as well.
Thank you. We now move on to the minutes of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel held on the 15th September 2017, and that's pages 1 to 10. For accuracy, if we just move through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Are we happy about the accuracy of the minutes? Yeah. Can I know, are there any matters arising? Whether you want me to go through all the pages again. Any matters arising from pages 1 to page 9. Any matters arising? No? Could I just make an observation that I think that the minutes of the last meeting, very well recorded, a lot of information, and first class minutes. They read like a short story, if I could just make, okay? We now move on to pages 1122, which is the update by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. Go.
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I begin to make sure I don't forget to wish you all the compliments of the season. In terms of my report, you've had an opportunity, of course, to read it. There are just a few matters I would like to re-emphasise, and then, of course, be very happy for my team to take any questions on any aspect of the report, or indeed things that you feel have been missed. In terms of the report, clearly the issue of the precept is now out for public consultation. And we will discuss this in far more detail when we get to item 8 on the agenda, and I would suspect that will be the main discussion of today, but that, of course, is a matter for yourselves. And when we get there, what you'll hear is a brief introduction from myself, operational details about how future funding could be used by the Chief Constable, and then the financial appraisal by Darren Garwood, my Chief Finance Officer. So I'll leave any further comments until we get to item 8 on the agenda, with your permission, Chair. In terms of the other issues in there, I'd just like to highlight a few things. One is the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs. A bid led by South Wales Police, but on behalf of all the 4 Welsh police forces, was successful in getting collaboration through the Transformation Fund. This was announced by the Home Secretary at a summit that we had a couple of months ago in London. That's £6.8 million over a 3-year period for the 4 Welsh police services, together with Public Health Wales, to look at the issues around developing child adverse experiences, to see how we can best prepare and understand the impact that they have on future life. So it's a very important piece of work. It's something that the Welsh Government is very interested in. Superintendent Mike Richards has been appointed to lead the Gwent side of things, and no doubt there'll be reports on that further in due course. If I could just draw your attention to item 2.1, the modern slavery and human trafficking. This is a very important development. I represent on the Welsh Government's leadership group on people trafficking and modern slavery. I represent the 4 Welsh Police and Crime Commissioners, and indeed Julian Williams represents the 4 Chief Constables. So you can say Gwent is very highly involved in a very direct way on this work, and very important work it is too. We are developing the profile of modern slavery and human trafficking so that people understand the depth of this criminal activity, and will work with us to help identify perpetrators and to seek the liberation of those who are ensnared in this. I can provide details, of course, if people wish, of the way in which that leadership group is working. We recently had an important meeting, a day's seminar with the Office of Security and Cooperation in Europe, where they listened to the work that we were doing in Wales on this area, and they were genuinely impressed and told us so with the quality of the work, and indeed said we were well ahead of the rest of the United Kingdom in terms of the way we approached this matter. And indeed ahead of many parts of Europe. And just to let you know, we're organising together with Joyce Watson, AM, who chairs the all-party group at the National Assembly on people trafficking and modern-day slavery. At the 31st of January, we have a special event to which you've been invited at the Senedd to again highlight the importance of this work and to get Assembly members to sign up to work with us. I just want to bring to your attention, because it could be misinterpreted, there is a slight typo at the top of page 14 on the issue of engagement. That paragraph, sorry, I beg your pardon. Oh yes, there it is. That first paragraph, the last sentence, e.g. use of 101 or by ensuring that that should read learning, not earning. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea on. All right. Yes, that's right. You can blame the Chief Finance Officer for that. Just a little while ago, we launched, for the first time in Wales, the mini police scheme, based around 3 primary schools in central Newport. It's a pilot programme, and if successful, we will roll it out across the whole of Wales. The whole of Gwent, I beg your pardon, but it could well be rolled out across Wales. The launch was attended by Kirsty Williams, who, as you know, is the Cabinet Member for Education at the Welsh Assembly, at the Welsh Government, and she made it very clear how supportive she was of this work. It's not just an issue of good citizenship and building up good citizens for the future. They are practically working, and indeed I know that my deputy, Aleri, went out with local police officers and the mini police recently, litter picking, identifying graffiti, talking to their peers and indeed parents about good citizenship. It will also be very supportive of the new curriculum for Wales in terms of that broader education and the value of community cohesion. I just want to quickly refer to item 4.2, tackling community concerns, because this is a good example for the future. I was contacted by councillors and indeed Assembly member and members of Parliament for the Rumney area of Caerphilly Borough because of persistent antisocial behaviour and fears around substance misuse and drug trafficking and issues like this. So we managed to pull together at quite short notice all the key agencies, including the third sector, that are involved in providing this type of support at a local level. What that led to was a public engagement event just on the 14th of December, which I attended, as did many police officers and representatives of my office, and that was supported by, again, a considerable number of councillors and indeed of key partners. And there were a lot, I didn't count them, but there were a lot of local people turned up to get information and advice, and it certainly went down well, and it was a good example of partnerships in action to provide information and opportunities for dialogue with the local community and local individuals. We are going to talk about the estate later on item 7, except to say that we also had a discussion yesterday at the Joint Audit Committee, the JAC, and they received a presentation, the same one that you have, and they generally welcomed it. I will add a few comments when we get to that item further. I'm going to ask Sian Curley if she would just explain to you the implications of 5.3 and 5.4, the General Data Protection Regulations and the Legitimacy Scrutiny Panel, and what that means.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the General Data Protection Regulation comes into act in May next year, and one of the requirements is for every organisation to have a data protection officer, and that'll be a statutory role in the same way as the Chief Executive, Chief Finance Officer roles. Obviously, Commissioner's offices are very small, so it's one of the things we're looking at is to share one for all of the Commissioner's offices in Wales. So at the moment, Cerith Thomas is seconded from the South Wales Commissioner's office to do an all Wales role for us. So he's taken that forward for us all, as well as a few other issues in relation to complaints, legally qualified chairs as well. So we're looking wherever we can to collaborate on matters rather than have new members of staff for every office in Wales. The Legitimacy Scrutiny Panel, if I can say it, is something, it's an expansion of what was previously a stop and search dip sampling panel. It works out as quite timely because the HMIC legitimacy report was released a couple of weeks ago for the force, and there was a good outcome given, but one of the recommendations was that the police force should put in place more ways of scrutinising things like use of force, body-worn video, as well as stop and search. So luckily we already had these changes in train. So what we've done is expanded our dip sampling group, which is made out of the independent advisory group members, members of the public who come in and work with the force and us on such matters. And the first meeting was last month, and there'll be a report that we'll be publishing shortly, which will make recommendations to Gwent Police about how they can make improvements in regard to the way they do all of those pieces of work.
Thank you. In terms of key achievements, I think I must mention under item 7, meetings with the Cabinet Secretary. We meet with the relevant Cabinet Secretaries at least every 6 months with the Welsh Government. That's the 4 Chief Constables and the 4 Police and Crime Commissioners. We find those meetings very useful, and you'll see some examples there included in the report of the sort of items that we discuss. Of course, the last meeting that we had was with Carl Sargent, and Carl had been a friend of mine for many years. We'd entered the National Assembly together in 2003, and indeed we both served in government from 2011 until 2014, and indeed Carl for longer than that. What happened to Carl is a terrible shock to all of us. Only now am I coming to terms with the fact that I'll never see him again. I attended his funeral on the 1st of December, and in terms of engagement with the Welsh Government, he's got big boots to fill but for his replacements. As a result, of course, there's been portfolio reshuffles, and now our two main Welsh Government Cabinet Secretaries will be Alan Davis from Blaenau Gwent and Julie James from Swansea for different sections of the portfolio. We'll need to look for a different way of working because of the way that the portfolios have altered. But we're going to miss Carl very much. He was extremely supportive of us, particularly on issues of violence against women, community safety, and a range of other matters. And I paid tribute to Carl on different forums, and probably will continue to do so for a while. It's a terrible tragedy for the Assembly and for Wales as a whole. What I'll do, again, with your permission, Chair, is ask Larry Thomas, my deputy, to give us an update on where we are with the Welsh language standards.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to provide assurance to the committee that the work that both the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and Gwent Police are taking forward on the Welsh language standards is bearing fruit. We have regular correspondence with the Welsh Language Commissioner and her office. Her compliance officer is in the Gwent Police today to discuss our performance and compliance with the standards, and we really do take this work forward with great commitment. We also, in the last period, have now secured the appointment, and she has started, of our Welsh language translator. So we have a permanent member of staff who is now working alongside Gwent Police and the Gwent Police and Crime Commissioner's Office to provide direct translation for members of the community when they require it.
Thank you. Can I say, in terms of the Joint Audit Committee, I've mentioned it, we met with the Joint Audit Committee yesterday, very successful, a long but very successful meeting. I think we can say that they were content with the way in which the accounts are kept, with the audit reports from the Wales Audit Office and general discussions on issues including the estate. But I dare say that certainly Darren will refer to it in a bit more detail when he comes to make his contribution on agenda item 8. The seminar on near misses in police custody, we were asked by the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, to host a seminar on the issue of near misses, which, if you like, is about people who were in danger perhaps of losing their life, or at least having a serious accident whilst in custody, what lessons have been learnt, and how we all, for Welsh police forces, can improve matters. That was widely attended by the 4 police service areas in Wales, and indeed we were praised and thanked for hosting that seminar, and those involved felt it had been a very useful engagement. Drawing to a close, I just want to mention what the All Wales Visioning Day, item 16, is about. This is a new initiative where, again, considerable numbers of representatives from the 4 Welsh forces at a senior level, both in terms of the police and the offices of the Police and Crime Commissioners across Wales, will meet. It's agreed now on a 6-monthly basis to discuss issues of common concern, and certainly to develop stronger relationships with the Welsh Government. We were very pleased to welcome the First Minister to our first meeting. He took questions and he seemed to quite enjoy the event and found it useful, and we'll be looking to build upon that strengthening relationship with the Welsh Government through the First Minister. And that's important because we have to remember that, of course, policing is not devolved. Nevertheless, we want the strongest possible relationship with the partner agencies that are devolved, and that means we really need to have an excellent relationship with the Welsh Government, and I think we're well on that way to developing that. The final issue I want to mention, Chair, number 17, changes to the Partnership Fund. We're about to go live with this. I have informed you that there will be changes. We'll also be changing the name so that there's no confusion. We haven't settled on a new name yet. But whereas the previous fund was very much inviting any organisation to submit a bid, provided it was more or less in line with the police and crime priorities, we're now going to target the monies that we have through the Proceeds of Crime Act so that we support organisations in some of the most disadvantaged areas of Wales, particularly those that can work with young people who may be in danger of entering the criminal justice system if there isn't diversionary activity developed. And it will involve our neighbourhood policing teams engaging with organisations and individuals that can achieve that work. We'll have the positive advantage of perhaps fewer projects supported, but each with more money, so that there can be more meaningful engagement and outcomes. And we'll also raise the profile, especially amongst young people, of the role of neighbourhood policing. Not seeing a police officer as someone who's come to move them on or even arrest them, but is actually engaging with them to help them in their future lives. And I think that would be a very positive development. I'll leave it there, Chair, and I'll happily take questions on any aspect of the report.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive insight. Peter Nuttall's got a question.
Provision of diversion schemes 1.2 and also the ASBO on 4.1, commendable things to do. There is slight concern in the public and amongst ourselves, individuals of ourselves, on the use of cautions and warnings by the police. That seems, or would appear to be, increasing at a large rate. Do you keep figures on that at all, or not?
I wonder if I could ask the Chief if he might like to respond to that.
Yes, we do keep figures. It is an option, as you know, Mr Nuttall, and I think we spoke about it the last Police Crime Panel meeting. It is something we look at now, Criminal Justice Board, and something is looked at in the National Criminal in the All Wales Criminal Justice Board as well. It's not a matter of concern for us at the moment, and if you have got issues, please pass them on in particular areas, and I'll get them interrogated and passed back to you. I would like to think that we use a range of options in relation to dealing with someone for an offence, whether that be voluntary attendance or arrest. The most serious of offences, of course, we'll arrest because that person needs to be in custody at that time. But we are using voluntary attendance because we have gone to one custody suite as well, and it's a better use of our officers and staff time. But it is noted if there are concerns, and if the panel requires, they'll get those details back to you, what the current levels are. But it's not something that would come up on our risk radar at the moment.
Thank you.
Colin wants to come in, but it's just observation I just wanted to make. It was about a month ago, 6 weeks ago possibly, where the Metropolitan Commissioner made an observation about that subject really, and about the fact that there were persons being cautioned a lot and they weren't going through the proper procedures really, and then she had some concerns, but that was something that she actually said really. But obviously it's something that that you monitor. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, Mr. Guy, I think it's fair comment when we have the range of options. If you do caution them, obviously their relevant details will be taken, and they'll be on Police National Computer, etc. So we've got those details and be available for interrogation around the country on Police National Database anyway, so that is good. And I would like to think the people who we think are a serious threat, we identify and process correctly. Obviously, the Commissioner is talking about issues as to the demand and the volume of people coming through the system. We're aware of that as well. And I think for ourselves, it's always a challenge to identify the right people and deal with them in the correct way, because I know, Senator, we had a conversation last time as well about what do we want for the future of people if we criminalise them, and it's those sort of issues. We certainly look at first public safety, the risk, the threat that they pose, and if they do pose that threat, they be in custody and receive hopefully a custodial sentence and a record on them. I think there are issues in relation to IT in the country which we'll need to resolve in the future, and I hope we're getting there with our Project Fusion and the national IT infrastructure that will develop in time as well.
It's reassuring that your first priority there was public safety.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the report, Jeff. 1.1, the adverse child's experiences, and in fact 2.1. Pleased to see these are in the report. They are extremely important subjects. And with the ACEs, obviously, I think people are beginning to recognise that what happens to a child when they're very young affects them for the whole of their life, quite sadly. And the modern slavery, I mean, I think in most people's minds slavery is connected with 200 or 300 years ago when sort of people from Africa were taken to America and various places. But and it's difficult for people to believe that slavery is still going on in the times that we live in now. But I'm pleased to see that we are still focusing on that, and I think really a tribute to the work that our previous chief, Jeff Farrar, did in these areas, because I was in a meeting in the LGA a couple of months ago, and certainly officers there were certainly recognised the work that had been done in Gwent to actually to focus on these very difficult subjects. But say thanks for keeping on that work.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, we're looking forward very much to developing the ACEs agenda. And as you say, it's well established, not just in terms of potential for criminal activity, but on a whole range of issues, special educational needs, for example. The earlier you identify issues, the better prepared you are, and that's very much the theme behind it. And then, of course, to try to work to reduce adverse childhood experiences through a range of partnership approaches. On the issue of modern-day slavery, yes, automatically one thinks it's something that was abolished 200-300 years ago. It's not the case. And we're learning more and more about how organised criminal gangs from this country and abroad are indeed smuggling people, especially maybe not surprising when you look at the state of many countries within the world and people trying to flee economic difficulties as well as terror and war. That they fall victims to these people. We've had some very successful events. I've already reported on the work with employers. We had a public signing, again, with Carl Sargent of the Welsh Government's Code of Ethical Conduct, which is all about trying to make sure that employers will go that extra mile to make sure that they and their supply chain are not inadvertently utilising the services of people who've been trafficked and perhaps enslaved. And we are going to do some work now as well with the interfaith community, which is based on successful schemes elsewhere, to try and spread the word about the signs to look out for when they may suspect that people are being enslaved or being held against their free will. So there's a lot more work to do on that, but it's a very important piece of work, and it's of growing relevance in Gwent as it is across the rest of the UK.
Thank you. I think it was a good sign that certainly one of the events that I tried to sign up to was already full, so at least there is an interest there for people to learn from that.
Actually, exactly the same happened for me as well. I wanted to attend that, but could not attend it because it was already full. So you may want to think of expanding that.
What now? All right, okay.
Yes, on that point, there's an open invite to chair the Welsh Threat Group. Fortunately, I picked up from Jeff. Jeff had it a number of years ago. Then he went on to Nicky Holland as the Welsh Police Lead. Then we kept it in Gwent, fortunately, and I'm the Welsh Policing Lead now. So I chair Threat Group, National Threat Group, with all the partner organisations every quarter. You're all welcome to attend if you want to, and sit on that group to actually see what we're doing operationally, and lead on to what the Commissioner said. Personally, we're nowhere near there yet. I can guarantee you that with human trafficking, we are nowhere near there. It's so complex, really, and one of the key issues is the victims are too scared to tell us who's trafficking them, because they're looking after them and doing a number of things to stop them, and that's linked to CSE, guns, drugs, etc. Very, very difficult, I'd like to think, as a country. Theresa May, obviously, as well, has taken a personal interest. So, and they have a commissioner there. So it's a tough ask, but I think, we're right at the forefront on it in Wales and Gwent Police.
Are you doing work on the sort of psychology with this? Because one that springs to mind is it's a gentleman who was held in a caravan in a farm on the Gwent sort of a Gwent Glamorgan border, and again he'd been there for years and years and years. It was very difficult to believe that he couldn't psychologically, he just couldn't walk out and get away from that situation. And I think that's a typical example of the way that people like this are sort of influenced and held. Really.
Yes, we're very familiar with that case, and of course that was a British citizen that we're dealing with here, and we need to remember this isn't only about vulnerable people trafficked from overseas. There are also vulnerable British people that are being trafficked as well and held against their will. Although, as I'm sure the Chief will be able to explain, getting them to recognise that they are actually victims is not easy.
Case you speak about is obviously Darrell Semester, Operation Imperial, a number of years ago now in Gwent. We've learned from that, but I think for ourselves as a force, we've got to recognise that we can't constantly live on that success, and we have to have new successes moving forward, which we're constantly going to try and do. We're working with academia. The Commissioner's been involved, working with Dr. Bella Aurora, who takes the MSc in Global Governance down in University of South Wales. She's obviously linked to European academia somehow, and we have some postgraduate students and master's students working with the Missing Children's team, and part of their task really is to develop this sort of psychology into why people won't report, working with victims, especially young victims, which are even more difficult to track than the adult one, like Darrell. So yes, that is a key learning point for us with academia, and we've got a good link in.
Jill, and after that it'll be Bill.
Thanks very much. It's really interesting to see, going through the report, the amount of events and the amount of communication and engagement that's going on with people. And obviously you're delivering under the headings of the aims that you're looking to achieve. However, it's very important that we now start to see these meetings and these engagements actually turning into results. And you obviously are aware of my concerns about how we're illustrating performance. And you're obviously engaging with a lot of people on very serious topics. So we need to be turning this into data that says to the general public that since you have been in position, that people are feeling safer, that people are feeling more confident to report on crimes. And I think, for me, this is the element now which is strongly missing, and the way in which we need to go forward very quickly. I was quite disappointed to see that under key priorities under the next quarter, that there is actually no focus on demonstrating performance against the plan. We don't have baseline data yet. So for a plan that's been in place over a year, we currently don't have baseline data and know what we need to capture going forward, or what the OPCC needs to capture going forward to demonstrate how your aims are being achieved. And I think I'd really appreciate, we've talked about last time about the performance group going forward. That panel has received some information recently. But how are we going to ensure this progresses really quite quickly? Because for me, this is a fundamental issue that you need to be demonstrating as the OPCC, please.
Yeah, the point is very well made, and I do apologise for the fact that you haven't got that information in front of you in the coherent form that you're outlining. Similar issues were raised at the Joint Audit Committee yesterday and under the report on value for money about how you actually demonstrate the value of what we're doing. The point is well made. We have given commitments. I do apologise those are not in front of you in a coherent format. I have the Chief's assurance, however, that that work is complete in terms of the template, and for your January meeting, Chair, I can assure you, you will have that document in front of you.
Bill, and then Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 17, change to partnership fund. I noticed in your preamble to the presentation of this, you mentioned about targeting specific areas for funding, and that part I actually agree with you. I think you're making a step forward there. But then you went on to further mention about targeting the needs of areas of deprivation. There are areas that don't actually quite meet the deprivation priorities within Gwent, and these areas that don't meet those priorities within Gwent because they're perceived as non-deprivation areas have suffered through the through times when resources for policing has been desired elsewhere. They've taken them from what they see soft areas such as Langstone, Monmouth, and as you go round. What we are suffering now is the deprivation of support in these rural areas and the semi-rural areas within Gwent. It's just a gentle reminder to you that when you look at the dispersing of such funds to help people in need, do not neglect the other areas because we're already being neglected now. And very soon your rural and semi-rural areas may very well fall into the need of support via deprivation.
Thank you for that. And the point is very well made. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that other areas that falls outside, for example, the worst of the Welsh Index of multiple deprivation, the former Community First areas, will not receive support. I'm not saying that. But in terms of what we currently call the Partnership Fund, which is £300,000, it's not a huge chunk of money, but it's an important chunk of money in terms of making a difference, will be focused primarily at those areas where we think we can have the greatest impact in terms of helping to prevent and reduce the levels of crime. We will get something out of that as well. I know, for example, what's happened to youth work budgets across Wales, and I'm not suggesting in terms of youth work in Gwent that 300,000 will plug that gap entirely, but it'll perhaps set up a good example of how we can use public monies, in this case, money secured from villains who've had their ill-gotten gains confiscated, how it can be reinvested back in, and hopefully perhaps we can then generate support from other areas. There are also other sources of funds, such as the High Sheriff's Fund, which will remain quite separate. We provide money for that to match fund whatever they have, and we'll continue that engagement. So a wide range of organisations will be able to apply for that. And indeed, we do have other funds. But I'm focusing just in terms of that item on the monies from the Proceeds of Crime Act, targeting them where I think they can have the best effect and perhaps support long-term young people particularly, who could cause problems for society as a whole if they don't have that diversionary activity. In terms, however, of policing support for rural areas, I can't really deal with that, but I'll ask the Chief if he wants to comment on it.
Yes, of course, point well made, and resourcing is constant topic of debate for elected members of the public, and I can assure you internally as well, when our senior managers want more people in certain areas. The areas that are busiest in Gwent at the moment are Torfaen, Newport East, Newport West, followed by Blaen y Gwent, then Caerphilly, then Monmouth North and Monmouth South. That's how it's been for some time, and that's how it remains, and the majority of our resources response-wise go to those areas to cope with the demand. I would like to think our neighbourhood teams are embedded in areas, and I would just like to reassure people as well. And as an example last night, and I'll give that example now, we have other units who cover the east and the west of the force who can go to any areas to deal with issues. But again, more importantly is to have those resources embedded within your local areas. We had a firearms incident last night. We executed a surveillance operation, mobile arms surveillance threat, very serious, that would be considered across the whole of South Wales. We had those resources in Gwent. They're not based in Gwent, but we had them in Gwent. So we are flexible and dynamic enough to move our resources where they're required. But of course, it's a point well made, and resources are a matter of debate externally and internally. And the senior managers that represent you internally for us, I can assure you, are constantly asking for more as well.
I think I may add, if it gives you some reassurance, and we'll talk more about this when we get to item 8, in terms of the recruitment of more police officers. Over the last couple of years, we have recruited over 300 new officers. We're going to have about 160 this financial year and 120, or just over 120 the year before. And we've got another passing out parade for new recruits. I think it's the 5th of January. Yes. They will be allocated. That's not net gains of that amount, because you have to allow for police officers who will retire through natural means, but there's still a net gain, and every area will see some benefit from those. But more of that when we later on, perhaps, Chair.
Tony, and then Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning. One is a comment on the elderly bath scheme, which I felt was well reported on the press and on television, and I felt that the youngsters were very well enthused with what they were doing, and I think that that should be developed further. The second one is a question which I've actually raised earlier with our secretariat regarding the report from the prison, was it the HM Prisons Inspectorate? The question I asked, and I want some information on, is that the inspector were pleased to find that the majority of detainees in police custody were treated with respect, which suggests to me that there must be a minority not treated with respect. So I'm just wondering, really, are those bullet points a true reflection? Was there something wrong there? Because they're either treated with respect, all of them, or if there's a minority. I've asked the question, it'll be developed further, but for you particularly, you can pick it up possibly later on outside this meeting.
Well, we can do that, but I'll ask Larry, my deputy, to give you a briefish response now. But in terms of the first point, with Headley Bach, the mini police, yes, I take your point, absolutely. We think it's a great initiative. We're following on from the development of a scheme in Durham, but we're the first in Wales to introduce that. It is our intention, should the evaluation of the piloting prove positive, and I've got every reason to believe that it will, that we'll roll that out across all parts of Gwent. And absolutely, look, we quite deliberately chose a part of Gwent that has more than its fair share of difficulties to try and make an early difference. And so far, all the indications are that it's achieving that. But I'll ask my deputy to deal with the second point.
Great, thank you for the question. Just in terms of the mini police, I should just update the panel that we are just in the process of establishing a second phase. So Superintendent Mike Richards has just been successful in securing some national funding to extend the pilot phase across Gwent, and we're just starting those discussions about where we will be looking to recruit new schools across the both local policing areas, so wanting to cover both the east and west of Gwent, and certainly will want to engage with yourselves around local communities who could benefit in that work. In terms of the question around the HMIC report, I mean, firstly, we're really pleased that it was a spot inspection. It was unannounced, and we're really pleased on the outcome of the inspection, recognising the tremendous work that our officers and staff have done in our custody unit in Newport. We've gone back and had a look at the inspection report. There are no there are no figures in the report as to the number of people that they have spoken to, but the wording in the report from the inspector does say that all of the detainees that were spoken to demonstrated that they were treated with respect. So we can certainly go back to HMIC and achieve and get the further detail for you, but certainly from the report, it's indicates, so that I think the terminology, the majority, is being used to demonstrate that there was good feedback rather than there was a minority who were treated with disrespect.
See, this fits in with your bullet point 12, the seminar on near-misses. I think they all fit in on the same sort of category. Charlotte is looking into this outside the meeting. I think that bullet point shouldn't be there personally.
No, I can give an example. They mentioned to us in the hot debrief, and one of them was the fact that, for example, where detainees have their own clothes taken away from them, they're given anti-rip suits to wear. And this is where there's potentially a conflict between somebody's human rights and the ability to wear their own clothes and their health and safety, where they're given alternative clothing to wear to keep them safe. And that would be one of the examples where they say that might not be treating somebody with respect because they're not able to wear their own clothes. But the custody staff on that day may have made a judgment that it's more appropriate for them to be wearing anti-rip clothing. And that was one example they gave to us. So whereas it may seem that disrespect is perhaps a term that they would use, that might be an example of what they mean by not treating the individual with respect.
We've only got one custody suite in Gwent now, haven't we? And what is the average number of detainees per day, per week? Is it very high?
Yes, we've got one custody, it's now in Newport. We used to have with us Romana 60 cells, we've got 30 cells in Newport. It's on 5 occasions throughout the year, 5, 6 probably, although, we can't say that's for certain going forward. It goes over 30, I'd say probably during a 24-hour period, difficult to estimate, 25. That's sort of people going through, but I really proud of the custody report. One, because it was unannounced and they didn't see any fresh paint. We didn't get a chance to do a huge amount beforehand. I think all inspections should be like that, to be honest. They'll be much better for us and the group inspecting us. What was absolutely brilliant, they focused on the medical provision we've got, because with 2 custodies, we had one nurse driving between both in the middle of the night. Don't think that's safe for the detainees or the nurse themselves. Just shouldn't have happened. And now we've gone to having that one nurse there now with a much better governance framework and clinical governance behind it. And I really thought positive, the respect that we're showing people. We've worked hard on there. Certainly not perfect, and it's an unenviable position to work sometimes, a custody officer and police staff member, because you're dealing with the riskiest elements of society, and we're constantly developing it. But just to reassure everyone as well, we plan for the Christmas period tonight, tomorrow night, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, and the day after. We'll have significant resourcing in there to be able to cope and look after the safety of the detainees. And what's really important for me, safety of the staff working in there as well. Hugely important, and the public, of course, because that's a spin-off from all of it.
Okay, could I just add on before I forget, the Headley Bach, the mini police, on a light-hearted note, one of the young children there wanted the chief's job there, and I think you offered it to him if he gave you his hat.
Yes, I think it's an easy replacement, because I'm often called Headley Bach because I'm not that tall myself, but it's something that I'm obviously trying to get away from, but not very successfully, that's all.
Stuart wants to ask a question, clarification. It has been covered. I know whether you want to still have a clarification on that subject area.
No, thank you, Chair. The Commissioner covered that. My question was the mini force, and you've already answered that it is likely to be rolled out in other areas. So thank you for that.
Okay, next, Bill and then Colin.
Chairman, going back, Commissioner, I am equally as challenged as you have. I'm glad to be sat down. Am I stood up? I'm not quite sure. So, the mini police, if I can take you back to Newport just for a second. We have a school in the ward I represent, Langstone Primary School, The Tregan Road, which is the road outside the school, has been notoriously dangerous to the safety of children. There has been, we have not been successful in traditional policing matters there. We're not successful. It's not a failure, but we just haven't produced the success. It's because the 20-minute rush at both ends of the school drop day produces a driver that is not ever seen anywhere else in the UK except for that time frame, where they actually become not illegally parking, but inappropriate parking, double parking, pavement parking, and the volume of traffic there leads to the overall danger of that road to pedestrians. The school itself, in association with the local police, produced a video that went out onto YouTube with the school children to actually demonstrate the dangers and how serious it is that the people who inappropriately park at these times of day could actually take their lives away and end them rather early. Following on from that, because this school has proactively taken things into its own hands, I think the next natural progression would be the mini police. Because traditional policing methods have been unsuccessful, maybe it's time for us to look to new policing methods, and we would welcome being a part of that next pilot, because we've already made the strides forward ourselves.
Yeah.
Can I just make an observation? Everybody wants mini police, don't they? Because they can interrogate and direct their parents to do what they should do, really.
Well, actually, that is the point. It's very much about the education of adults, because what you're describing, I know it to be the case, and when I was an Assembly member, it was something that used to come to me on a regular basis, and education is much better than enforcement. And if we can get people, adult drivers in this case, to understand that by parking inconsiderately, they are actually endangering the lives of other adults and children, then perhaps they'll stop doing it, or at least take far more care over it. And there have been occasions now with the mini police that we're starting with, where they've actually spoken to people to say, why are you parking here? And it's beginning to have an impact. And as we've said, yes, the intention is that we will now be rolling out the mini police far wider across Gwent, but both points are very well made.
Yeah, can I just make a quick comment on that subject? I understand that Rhondda Cynon Council have an unmarked van with a camera in which they go around schools, and in fact I think initially advise people as to their inconsiderate parking. So I mean, that's a council initiative, but I mean, it might be something that people could bear in mind. On the Headley Bar, I assume the youngster wanted to negotiate his own terms and conditions, so he took it on to him. But this again, the other subject is probably maybe more relevant to item 8. But when you were talking about one custody suite in Gwent, I was bearing in mind that the other, the mothballed, if that's the right word, suite is in Ystrad, which is a PFI scheme, and we all know the cost of PFI schemes and the poor value of keeping any PFI premises not fully utilised. And I was wondering what consideration had been given to that. Maybe it could be covered later, or maybe it can be covered now, I don't know.
Yeah, we certainly will deal with that later, and maybe it can be referred to when we look at the estate as well.
I think we've covered that. If we now move on to the, which is item 5 on the agenda, Gwent Police and Crime Panel webcasting meetings 23 to 26.
Thank you, Chair. This report gives members of the panel a review of the first year of webcasting panel meetings. It was agreed in September 2016 to start webcasting from December 2016. The panel, for a variety of reasons, looked at the different options and agreed to webcast and hold all its meetings at Monmouthshire because that was the easiest option. And it was also agreed that we would review the first 12 months. So this report under 3.6 shows the number of meetings that have been held, with the exception of one, which we couldn't hold at these premises, and the number of views. These are not necessarily live views, they are cumulative, so we don't necessarily know how many people are watching live. And at 3.8, I've put two options to the panel in terms of going forward. Option one is to agree to continue webcasting panel meetings that are open to the public and continue to meet at Monmouthshire County Hall. And option two is agree to discontinue webcasting the panel meetings and resume holding meetings across all 5 Gwent local authorities. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, I think we actually agreed, didn't we, that we'd follow item 1. So can we just show that we got agreement on that?
Option one, recommend.
Option 1, yeah. Okay.
All those in favour?
Chair, that's for the next 12 months, is it?
Yeah, and then we'll review it again in 12 months' time. Thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is the Gwent Police and Crime Panel complaints 27 to 52.
Thank you, Chair. This report gives members an overview of the complaints received by the panel in the previous 12 months. The breakdown of the complaints received and recorded are listed in Appendix 1. I'd like to also draw members' attention to, under Appendix 2, a draft complaints form, which is suggested to be used going forward for all complainants in order to inform the complaints in full and to ensure that the panel members who deal with complaints have all the information available to them. And finally, I'd ask members to note that the Home Office have now responded to the consultation carried out in December 2015, and I've attached that to Appendix 3. And this sets out the government proposals, which include the power investigation to panels, which I've listed all the proposals under 5.2. Thank you.
Jill, I believe you want to ask a question.
Yeah, a question really for the OPCC. Having done a recent complaint investigation, one of the things that we noticed is there were quite unacceptable delays in the way in which questions were responded to or the complaint was responded to. What assurances can you give us that future complaints that come into the OPCC will be dealt with in a more timely manner, please?
I will ask Sean Curley to respond to that point.
I think, as I mentioned, the complaints panel, I'm quite confident that if a complaint is a normal complaint that the Police and Crime Commissioner can deal with as a low level dissatisfaction, that the timeliness is good. The complaints that have resulted in complaints against the Police and Crime Commissioner have been outside of the normal procedures, and I think we've also identified, as part of, we've previously mentioned, the review of our office, of the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and the dealing with complaints and that type of governance has been classified as a pinch point for us, and that's something that we're taking into account in the plans that we'll put forward in the new year for more resilience in that area.
And is that something you'll look to bring back to give us that assurance about how complaints, should they come in, will be dealt with, and the sort of timeframes that people can expect responses in?
Absolutely. And what I'd also have suggested, and may be useful perhaps for an agenda item for the future, is to talk to you about the changes as a result of the Policing and Crime Act 2017, the changes that will result in the Commissioner's Office taking on responsibility for reviews of complaints investigated by the police force. If I can explain those type of matters, I think that will help when you come to deal with any complaints that come further on from there.
Thank you.
If the panel can just note that report, which is in some detail, note the procedure and the report on that, and also the determination, the complaints on form, that we are happy with that, with the complaints form. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now move on to item 7, which is the estate strategy for Gwent Police, 53 to 70.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say a few words by way of introduction. You see the draft in front of you. and we'll take questions, clearly. Points I want to make. First of all, it's draft, because we want to see what your comments are and to see if they can be incorporated when we move to the final paper. But hopefully it sets out the clear flavour of the way we want to go forward in terms of our direction. Now, I've made a number of public statements making it clear that in terms of our estate, which is basically the new headquarters and the police stations out and about across parts of Gwent, we will not be withdrawing from any communities in Gwent unless there's some highly exceptional reason for doing so, and I can't envisage what that might be at this point. We're looking very much to make sure that where we have police premises, they are visible, that they are accessible to the public, and also allow the police officers to exercise their duties in an appropriate manner, taking account of the current changes in the nature of crime and undoubtedly the future changes in the nature of crime. One only has to look at the extent of cyber-based and cyber-enabled crime to realise the implications that there are for policing, both in terms of their physical resources and their skill sets. We have talked about the issues around the new headquarters before. We're moving forward on that within a cost envelope to new premises. The Chief and I, Wednesday of this week, went to see a similar, but not identical, but a similar building that we will probably be going for through our architects, Atkins, and the contractors, BAM, that's in Aztec West in Bristol, and it was quite an impressive visit. We need to move to a headquarters that is suitable for operational policing needs and at the same time welcoming to members of the public who wish to come in for whatever the issue may be. We also want a building that puts at the top of its agenda the well-being of all staff in terms of the suitability of their working environment and the equipment that they have, and the importance now of agile working, and we're going forward with that. Clearly, the public becoming more aware of the fact, because we've not hidden anything from the public in terms of publicising the fact that we are going to develop a new headquarters. There is interest developing now, and one can understand it. At times of austerity, we're spending about 17 million thereabouts on a new headquarters, and it'll need to be kitted out properly, of course. And people are saying, well, more officers, that comes first. Well, it's not a chicken and egg situation in our regard. That money has been secured. It's part of our reserves, which no doubt Darren will refer to later on. It's been there. It was actually, money was put together before I became the PCC, so it's not a new development. So it will in no way impact negatively upon our ability to recruit police officers and to make sure that they have the facilities that they need. Now, in terms of the estate strategy outside of what I call the central estate, we are going to move to what we call a hub and spoke model. There will be a number of hubs, and the report illustrates that, across Gwent, and those hubs will be able to house significant amount of resources. They'll be based near central road arteries, good for being able to get to other points quickly. Obviously, we'll look to some of our key buildings for that. We're not looking to necessarily build new premises where we can adapt existing ones, so we'll try and keep the costs to a minimum. They will then be supported by spokes in various communities. An example of which is the new police station that we've opened in Caerphilly town just a few months ago, and I know a number of you have been to see that. Right in the heart of the commercial centre on Cardiff Road. That's the type of facility we'll be looking to develop if a new premises is indeed needed. We also want to make sure that our estate is seen very much as part of the community. And we do have a number of police stations which would suggest sharing resources, because some of them, have quite a bit of spare space with other public services where that's appropriate, even community third sector groups where appropriate, so they can become community hubs with a policing presence. And that's the concept that we're going to go forward on. We want our estate to be part of the protect and reassure message that we give out to people. We know that the actual footfall in terms of police stations is pretty low. Most people contact the police by other means, particularly through telephone and Twitter and things like that, and that's absolutely fine. But we also understand the reassurance that physical police stations provide for local people, even if they don't actually want to go in there. But they can go in there, taking Caerphilly as an example, if they have issues to discuss and receive some satisfaction by way of a response. I'll leave my introduction there, Chair, if I may, but any questions? Happy to deal with it. In terms of operational issues.
Sorry, Commissioner, to interrupt you so abruptly. You mentioned about accessibility of police stations and the security that adds, and I actually agree with you. If that was just the case in Orway, you try and get into Orway. I had a recent meeting with the inspector of Orway, and I felt like the big bad wolf. I knocked, I huffed, I puffed, I rang bells, I jumped up and down, I shouted, I hollered. My council colleague turned up, and he huffed and he puffed and he banged and then he remembered, no, we can't get in this way. We've got to go round the back and press the bell for the deliveries, and then we get taken in through the back door and up the stairs and through the office. Now, okay, why? I don't know why, because they don't man the front desk. They actually are all there, mind. They're all upstairs, listening to us holler and press the bells and do all this. So the police station in Orway is actually very secure for keeping the police away from the public, or the public away from the police. It certainly isn't, as you described, a place of providing a nice environment for people to come in and walk and talk. It doesn't. It has a presence to it, but it's nothing to do with accessibility of the public. The police station in Orway.
Well,
you know this, John?
We gotta be careful we don't become parochial here. Really, we're trying to keep the bigger picture. But I mean, what has been said is that the for the future, the whole aspect is going to be looked at, isn't it, and reorganised. You know, I can't disagree with what Bill has said, really, but it's a communication situation there.
Well, the point is well made. I've been to Orway myself. Mind you, I've got an advantage. I got a pass. Could I ask the Chief if he wants to add some comments?
Yes, I've been Orway as well, and you know Sarah, the inspector, is absolutely outstanding. You know what I mean? And Merv Priest there was working the sides who actually initiated mini police. You've got some outstanding people there. I've been out on patrol with Richie, the PCSO, and Deke, who does a huge amount with the cadets. Yeah, we know Mainly's open 9 to 5. Always doesn't present that. And it is as well. It's a different... I think it's got positives and negatives. The good thing about it is it's in with those businesses, and, you know, you speak to those people, so they obviously feel more secure. But, of course, there's the issue with, you know, getting in there at the time of the prearranged appointments. I would like to think the group of people we've got in there, if that bell is rung, they'll come down. They're really good and deal with a huge amount of demand as well, as you know. They do. I'll pass that back if that's the case. But, you know, I got a huge amount of time for the person that actually works there myself.
The reality doesn't bear out there. I mean, even to the extent that there was a suggestion of volunteering, manning the front desk, as it's called. I know that has issues, but hey, that's the reality.
Fine, and I fully accept that, and I'll pass those details back, and we'll come back to you on that. Thank you.
not a criticism.
No, not at all. Not at all. As you know, as she works well with yourself, Councillor Rightly, and you know, I would, and I know she won't be happy if that's happening. So I'll pass that back, definitely.
Sorry, just to reiterate, I think your comments, Chair, that this is very much a statement of intent of the vision for the estate of the future. So it is very much the commitment of both the Commissioner and the Chief Constable that we want to deliver this across our communities and make sure that we are providing, you know, the exemplar estate for our police officers and staff, but also for the community. And I think those are those reflections will help us really galvanise and deliver against this strategy.
Thank you, Chair. The police force has got 48 assets, 32 of which are owned and 15 leased, and of course the PFI, which I didn't know was in Caerphilly, but I do know now. I wouldn't expect you to say too much on my question, but is the long-term strategy of the police commissioner to divest oneself a lot of these properties, or is your intention to retain them within the force? Like, you can't say a lot because we've been webcasted, but it's just a general comment on that. And the second question is regarding the new building we're going to put up at Llantarnam. Going back about 2 months, a group of us went to the control room at Crossy Kellogg. Excellent 2 hours we spent there. People were busy. But one thing I did find is that it seems it's outgrown. It's not as usefulness. It's outgrown this space for the people living there. They're all cramped. And to conducive for better working, will we have a bigger space within Llantarnam when it's developed for this particular facility? And also, I picked up in another area that within the next 12 months, you will be in collaboration with the Welsh Ambulance Service, taking on, as in South Wales Police, some paramedics within the control room to sort of assist on various emergency calls that you get.
Yes, once again, you know, if the Chief will want to comment from the operational side, that's fine. In terms of divesting ourselves of existing premises, no plans for that. I mean, but look, the main thrust will be to make sure that we have appropriate, usable premises that actually provide for public safety and police effectiveness. Clearly, I can't state here and say never. Can't do that. We have to keep things under review. But the main thrust, the main message I want to give is that we want policing to be visible. We want them to have physical premises that support the current needs for policing, taking account of new types of crime, some of which we've talked about here. And that will be the main thrust. Also, with the well-being, of course, of all our staff, whether we're talking about civilian staff or police officers in the premises in which they work. In terms of the control room, I can assure you that we have many meetings in terms of the design of the new building, and one of the key issues is adequate facilities for the effective operation of the control room. I can give you that assurance. And whilst we're not suggesting we're going to have a Rolls-Royce of a building that will, you know, be 100% suitable for everything, it will be as good as we can get, but certainly we take the point about adequate premises, suitability of the rooms, with natural light in them, for example, and that it's a good place to work. But the specific needs of the control room, I can assure you, will be taken account of. There was a third point of... I can do that. I can do that. Mental health. Mental... Well, we will do, but yes, we already have some mental health professionals, for example, in the control room. That will be expanded because the way in which they provide advice and support to officers on the ground is exceptional. But I'll let the Chief come in.
Control room, key part of the consideration, the new headquarters, and of course, yes, it's probably a difficult environment now for people doing such a specialised role in what they do now. New headquarters would be much better, be fit for purpose. I can't give you the exact size requirements, etc., but it'll be fit for purpose, and we've operated during the strategic and operational meetings along personal space tactical guidelines, which are a national consideration. In relation to the mental health professionals, I think that's a huge success for us as a force. Throughout the country, we all work a bit differently, which is a bit strange, but everyone has their own views. We've had the clinician who's been in there at the time who's got ready access to records, because a huge amount of it is ready access to records at that time, which our police officers and staff don't have. On that one shift, we've seen a considerable demand reduction, and the police officers you speak to and police staff think it's an absolute winner. With support of the Commissioner's Office now, we've been able to obtain a bit of a tough process to get people in there, a group of people who go in there to cover all shifts. That'll be in January, and I would look forward to that being a real success in a couple of areas, reduction in demand, but most importantly, best service to the public who's got a mental health crisis at that time. I think that'll really, really work, and I think other people will pick up on the model in the country that we're going to put in place.
Okay, and one further question is regarding the hubs and spokes of the future, particularly in the south of the county. You illustrated what you want to do in the north of the county, but with the onset of a delay on this M4 relief road, will that have any effect on your policies in terms of where you'll have your hub for what you consider to be the M4 access and things like that? Has that put things on ice? And furthermore, in terms of working in collaboration, Meagher and Undy, the police in Meagher and Undy work in conjunction with the Community Council. I would see that as being a positive way forward.
Yeah, look, this is a major operational issue in terms of locations. It does appear that there's going to be a two-year delay, further delay in terms of the M4 relief road. But, you know, we're aware that there could be issues during the construction phase. And it may well have an impact on it. I don't know if the Chief wants to add anything more at this point on that.
As it develops, it will do. And thanks for the feedback on Meagher and Undy. I think it's Nigel's the sergeant, isn't he? Nigel Callard? Yeah, Nigel, I know he's been doing a huge amount of work there in relation to, speaking of Matt Williams as well and Mike Richards. It's good to see that collaboration's working. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, agree with a lot of the hubs and spokes stuff that's already been mentioned. I was pleased to read in paragraph 8 that you are looking at the sustainability for the future and looking at the codes for to be carbon neutral and a bit further up to obviously recycle old buildings where possible for other uses. I think that is all. That's all good message. Obviously, building a building to the proper standards impacts on number 9, where hopefully the running costs will be a lot better in a decent building than some of the buildings that we've seen in the past. I don't know whether you want to cover the point I mentioned about PFA now, or whether it's going to be done later. But
sorry, I didn't catch that last point.
The PFI point.
Yeah, look, I will ask down to that later on.
Okay, thanks.
But just in terms of sustainability, absolutely, we want to move towards carbon neutral buildings. We will be constrained by the BREEAM standards, which we have to meet. In fact, there'll be a penalty if we don't meet them. Very much part of the design issues, and indeed there'll be quality control of the building work to make sure that we do meet those standards.
Just one on the BREEAM stuff. As you probably know, there are various ways of achieving it, and obviously I would like to see the more productive ways of achieving it being used rather than some of the others.
Thank you. Paragraph 8, paragraph 6 talk about the current assessment. When was the latest assessment carried out? And who undertook that? What was the experience behind that?
As part of the financial accounting process, we use Cook and Arkwright to assess the estate as part of that, so that would be 31st of March 17.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. Was it that the properties were in good and reasonable condition, or that they were actually fit for purpose for delivering a police presence?
A mixture, I'd say. It is, you know, they're in good enough condition, but appreciate the estate strategy is written on the basis that we need to improve and develop, embed new working practices, and we've really put the well-being of staff and public need at the forefront of our strategy. So it's part of that longer journey.
And I note the point about you not looking to divest of premises. You've obviously got presence in various areas. Obviously, you've just recently reopened Caerphilly Police Station. I understand you're not going to be looking to close that. However, in terms of looking forward, are you constraining yourself by saying we're only going to use existing premises? Or are you actually saying we want to keep a presence in a particular area? Let's look at that property. How expensive is that property to maintain? And actually, could we look to bring either people in or co-locate?
Yeah, no, it's the latter. It's the presence in communities that will drive us here. I mean, we do, as I've said, with some buildings, we'll look to see whether we can share them if there's significant empty space, which to me would seem a no-brainer. But if it's considered better to relocate to a better premises within that community, more centrally based, more appropriate to modern policing, then we'll look at that as well. But the emphasis is very much on not withdrawing from communities.
Just to add to that, that when in any process of development, we will be developing individual business cases for each stage of implementing the estate strategy. And critically important within that is a commitment to work with both our police staff, police officers, but also our key stakeholders, partners, local authority, councillors being, a really important part. That there would be a comprehensive engagement plan as we develop each of the business cases so that people are able to contribute and have an open and very transparent dialogue.
Given that, in terms of taking this forward then, in terms of developing where these resources are going to be, are you bringing any external expertise in, or do you feel you've got the expertise in-house to deliver this? And how realistic then is it that you've got 400,000 put aside in 2018-19 to do work on the Monmouth hub? Given that we're in December 17 now, you've just talked about the engagement that needs to be done. How realistic is it that work would actually start and complete in that time period?
That sum there is set aside. We've been on a journey with the Fire and Rescue Service in Monmouth for a hub provision. I believe ambulance service are joining us as well. So that conversation has been part of a longer piece of work that I suppose has helped us shape the future way of working in this strategy. So conversations are well advanced, plans are well advanced, so I have confidence of that sum being spent in 18-19.
Okay. And to clarify then, what expertise does the panel have to be able to ensure that that actually is the right route that you need to be going down? You're talking about, dealing with the community, and you're saying the estate strategy isn't final, and then you're saying actually we're quite far down the route of that particular one with Monmouth. So how draft is this and how final is this document?
Well, it's a fair point. It's a bit of a mixture. I mean, as Darren's indicated, some things are known knowns. There are some known unknowns, and this as applies more generally. But where we feel the need for external advice, that will be taken. Yeah. Do you want to?
Obviously, the estate is overseen by the Commissioner, but we have a professional department within Gwent Police that leads under the Assistant Director for Resources the delivery of the estate's work for the Commissioner. Within that team, we have somebody with a professional qualification in terms of estates management, but also we have support from Monmouthshire County Council's estates team, who specifically provide the quality surveyor type additional professional expertise for both the HQ build but also the estate strategy. We are also in conversation about looking at making sure that we've got our comprehensive capacity covered. So there may be issues around looking at, particularly around the environmental standards, for instance, and the agile working and wellbeing standards, that we bring in additional expertise when required to really assist us to make sure that this investment is investment for the future and that we don't lose this opportunity.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
You happy with that, Jim? Okay, I think we've exhausted that. We now move on to agenda item number 8 is the presentation and finance.
Yes, if I could just make a start. The main meat of this will be a presentation from the Chief in terms of the operational issues involved here. And he'll talk about future finances, how that could be used. And then Darren, of course, to go into some detail about the actual financial strategy. Many of you will be aware that there have now been announcements both from the Home Office and indeed from the Welsh Government about funding for the next financial year. And I'm sure Darren will emphasise the fact that for the first time in quite a number of years, we've not actually had a reduction in funding, although when one allows for inflation and other pressures, yes, you could argue that's not necessarily quite the case. Darren will go into it in more detail. There are other pressures, though, that will impact upon us. And these include the funding formula that's being worked on in the Home Office. We will have the outcome of that in the next financial year. At this point, we are anticipating that it will result in a cut for Gwent Police. We talked about £6 million cut. We'll have to see, but we need to be prepared for that. Of course, we have the pressures on public funding as a result of Brexit settlements that will affect public services, including the police. I've got no doubt about that. And then in terms of the 4 Welsh police forces, we even have the issues around the apprenticeship levy. And just to explain what that means, because policing is not devolved, we are obliged to pay the apprenticeship levy. In the case of Gwent, it's about £500,000 to the Exchequer. Training and development is devolved, but policing isn't. So it looks as if that money has not been forwarded to the Welsh Government. They make it quite clear that that is the case. Certainly the Home Office do not intend to fund us, so it looks at this moment as if we're going to have to pay twice for the professional development of police officers in Wales. Clearly we cannot allow the occupational standards of Welsh police officers to be lower in any way than those in England, but that's another pressure for us to try and deal with it. It's an example of confusion between devolved and non-devolved services, and the questions we keep putting to the Home Secretary is why on earth would you send money to the Welsh Government for the training of a non-devolved public service? And we are awaiting replies. With that, can I invite the Chief Chair to make his presentation?
I thought Dick Turpin was dead.
Commissioner, thank you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this. I think, it's up on the screen, great, okay. There are 24 slides, okay, I'm conscious of yourselves. I have been told by yourselves I can talk for Wales before, so quite disappointing. It's the only Welsh cap I've had, but there we are. You never know, there's 24 slides, so please bear with me. The presentation is going to be on demand we currently face, is estimated because, of course, you don't know what you don't know, and the complexity of what we're currently dealing with. And the way I would see it, and as Pam the Deputy and other people in the force would see the challenges we face, but of course some of the exciting opportunities that police officers and police staff would face in the future, because certainly in relation to protection of the public is a huge vast array of things they're going to have to do. If I can start off with, I saw it in the Commissioner's estate strategy. What's the policing vision for the future? Policing Vision 2025, it's been agreed on by the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, National Police Chiefs Council. 6 key areas, you'll all very much be aware of them. I'll briefly go through them. It is essential to maintain local policing. We've spoken about it a lot today throughout Gwent. Why? For legitimacy, trust and confidence. I think during the Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan engagement phase, the most important thing to individuals was visibility and accessibility, key to ourselves. And I think what is coming out in relation to counter-terrorist, serious and organised crime issues, and certainly looking back to Operation Ironside, Those of you who remember what happened down in Mainey and Allway last year, key part of that strategy was information coming through the PCSOs. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the information intelligence to extract the amount of detail we needed for serious and organised crime warrants. So that's a key part of what we're doing in Gwent. There is always a massive difficulty in balancing that with specialist capabilities. We're very aware in policing that crime is becoming more complex. It'd be a major theme of what I speak about. You've already alluded to human trafficking. Commissioner's spoken about cyber crime. We've not even spoken about forced marriage, female genital mutilation. Thousands occurring in the UK. None happening in Gwent. I doubt that very much. It's just we can't find it. So it's hugely complex and very much due to the individuals who control and have access to the level of funds to deal with this, very complex to deal and attack. We're very fortunate in Gwent, the Commissioner and myself represent the Welsh Forces on the National Strategic Capabilities Reform Programme, and that is looking at armed policing, technical surveillance, technical support teams, surveillance teams, roads policing, and those areas I think will deliver and rationalise across the country probably in the next 2 to 3 years. Because I think it's clear in some areas, in some specialities, in forces and in regions, we've skilled up to a certain area we may not use all the time by double and triple hatting, and we're going to have to rationalise that across our 9 regional organised crime units in the country. But I think the cost savings out of that will only fall out in the next 2 to 3 years, which is really important. But we're very fortunate, myself and the Commissioner represent Wales in that group. Workforce key element, you'll all be aware, and it was questioned on it, I think, a number of forums ago. Gwent, unfortunately, was seen as the second highest level next door neighbour. We collaborate a huge amount with South Wales in relation to officers and staff being off with anxiety. It's not something we're proud of. It's something that myself, my colleagues and the Commissioner's staff take very, very seriously. And we're doing a huge amount on health and well-being at the moment. I firmly believe if our staff feel they're valued, engaged, motivated, and what's key in the challenges of the future, skilled, they will deliver. Key aspect for us. Digital policing, 3 key areas, ensuring that we can communicate with all aspects of the criminal justice system to bring offenders to justice much quicker and ensure that we pass detail much quicker. There's always problems with that in passing. Unfortunately, the size of evidential files, that is a key difficulty we're going to have to face in the future. But that is the Digital First programme. You've just spoken about it, digital accessibility and digital investigation. And it was really interesting to listen to the estate strategy talk there, because I don't think any of us know how we're going to communicate next year, leave alone 2 or 3 years' time. And I think with the footfall the Commissioner went, I think we'd all agree that there's a certain group of individuals who will never enter a police station, regardless what they want to tell us. And there's a certain group who will enter, not because they want to report a policing issue, because they want to speak to someone, possibly. And that community service, we think we provide quite well, but it's something we've got to look at in the future. Enabling business delivery, I'll summarise that by saying partnership, back services, i.e. finance, IT. We've got an excellent collaboration with South Wales, which I think will become even more of a prominent partner in as we put a superintendent on our Fusion collaboration, and that will allow us to really sustain that back service provision of IT and governance accountability, ensuring we hold people to account in the service, what they're doing. I don't think so much locally, but I think nationally in relation to serious and organised crime, because we've got some tremendous people who work in the National Crime Agency, Rock, who's linking with us, but I think we need to detail how we bring that together and hold each other to account. All those 6, I think, link in perfectly with the plain English of the Commissioner's plan: crime prevention, supporting victims, effective service delivery, antisocial behaviour, community cohesion. What is current demand? At the moment, Gwent Police, on the end of the figures for last year, saw a rise in crime of 12%. Estimated we're going to have a rise in crime this year of 12%. Key areas that have risen are public order, 40% uplift, violence without injury, 18%, miscellaneous crimes against the person, 27%. Why has that occurred? A lot has been made of ethical crime recording. Yes, we are much better at recording crimes. We are. But I'd just like to tell everyone that every 5,000 extra crimes we've got to record, we've got to investigate, and the extra 5,000 we've got to record this year, we are investigating. That is a massive demand. Why is public order risen? I think, to be honest, we recorded a lot as antisocial behaviour before. We now record it as crime. And again, I think people are a lot happier to report minor issues, or we get third-party referrals via CCTV, etc., which we wouldn't have had in years gone by. So those are some of the reasons. Violence without injury. Just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with, 104% rise in the subcategory of sending letters with intent to tackle, to cause distress or anxiety. That's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's social media, cyberbullying. Have we got to grips with it yet? We're getting much, much better. I'll show you later on the complexity of the training we have to take place for frontline officers and those dealing with serious and organised crime, up to the level of training we've got to put in place. But we're very much aware of it, and I'll show you the success of the police line online investigation team later on. So what does demand look like? Constantly changing. When I joined 28 and a half years ago, I think we'd edge probably towards the left. In Gwent, on average, 31 arrests per day, 150 999 calls per day. That is 6 per hour. And please don't think that's just picking the phone up and putting it down. That can involve a huge amount of debate and reassurance, and then passing through a number of people before that is dealt with. What are we currently dealing with, and what are we going to deal with? I know we've got the slides in front of you. Key for me, 2 cyber attacks per day, 193 social media interactions per day. And I know some of you use Twitter, I'm very grateful for that, thank you. But every bit of Twitter that has to go on there, I think has to have some sort of response, so you maintain the confidence that we're listening and engaging with the community. 13 missing persons, I'll give you a case study. 6 mental health. We're now up to 25 mental health interactions per day. 25. 4 sexual offences. And again, quite appropriate, I think, by the white ribbon up the top. 45 incidents of domestic abuse. And if you speak to my colleagues working in frontline positions, huge amount of time is spent dealing with mental health and domestic abuse. And unfortunately, what you will find from the complexity of what we're now dealing with, officers have never felt under so much scrutiny, because it's truly a partnership response, and you're reliant just not on a police officer's actions, but a group of other people, and also the referral mechanism and keeping an audit trail of what we're doing is substantial. So the complexity of demand, to give you an idea. I've spoken about current threats for the future, and I've spoken to you about it before. Child sexual exploitation, human trafficking, cybercrime. I just ask you to look at a couple of boxes here, because I don't think there's any need to go into all of them. Top left-hand one, as you look at the screen, what's a victim? Victim of child sexual exploitation will probably be 81% of occasions 15 to 16 years of age and female. That brings with it a level of training that all officers and staff need to achieve and maintain and sustain, just to be able to interview that person and link in with a strategy discussion, which we now record as a crime. Move over to the right from that, 52% concern use of a mobile. I know you're aware of technology, the kiosk we have now, which will download straight away. Tremendous investment for the force, but very technical skills needed to use that and evidence it in the Crown Court if required. And again, key for an offender, 47% starts online. So not traditionally where meetings would have happened elsewhere. 40% of engagement happens online initially to build up a relationship which ends up in abuse. And that's throughout the country. I'll read this out because I know we can follow it. And what I want to get across here really is, when you're dealing with a child sexual exploitation case, looking in, what happens. I would probably think this could be 1 or 2 officers who would deal with something in a particular period of time. Far from it. June 2017, concern for safety reported. This was a female of 14 years, first reports signs of CSE. And you've seen some national debate around CSE coming out with a photo. There's a national picture we've used. What's the background of this person? She is associated with known drug users. So it could be trafficking, could be drugs, could be firearms, could be buying, dealing drugs, as we've had in certain areas of the county. Associating with other known victims. Deterioration in appearance, so associating with other known victims as well. This person could be inciting other people to get engaged in CSE, which we often find as well. Consuming alcohol, concerns about drug use, to and from school. Over 3 months, we had 7 incidents involving the same victim and a production of 32 documents, which are risk assessments and also referrals to other agencies as well. The allocation of 8 officers, not including call handlers, dispatchers, Phoenix Bureau, which deal with updating police national computer, etc., and strategy discussions across the agencies, and 17 administrative niche tasks completed on our record management system, so we're able to keep tabs of what we have. That one issue, which didn't lead to a crime, didn't lead to a court case, perhaps in certain circumstances, took 56 days of police activity, one individual, 601 focused hours. We've gone in the last year from 72 cases of CSE to 92 cases of CSE. So we've got an extra 20 times 56, 20 times 601 to put in the mix. We've invested in Operation Quartz, which I think is the right thing to do. Detective Sergeant and 4, and it's only there will be identify the true scale of CSE, and other forces are doing the same, so that's not unusual. Missing person case study, massive amount of our work. 4,724 missing occurrences this year. 908 of these are high risk, 20% are high risk. And as a police officer, what would I deem as high risk? Suicidal, age, young or old, vulnerability, drugs or drink, hasn't done it before. Domestic issues, financial issues, etc. What would you roll out for that? A police search team, helicopter, mountain rescue. You roll out the whole level of resources. Unfortunately, the 10 most frequent missing people have been missing, would you believe it, 850 times. 85 times each they're missing. And that's throughout all ages, just not children. And the most frequent missing person was missing 148 times. And 88 times that was assessed as high risk. And I mentioned about the scrutiny, which should take place, so the officers and staff dealing with this. The risk assessment is done to the point, dealt with appropriately across agencies, so we actually deliver on the safety of this individual. Average, it takes 6 hours, and on average, the staff involved in the investigation includes 2 police officers, and that's with the most minor incident we have, which could take an hour. 1 police sergeant, call handler, call dispatcher, intelligence officer, and I won't read out the amount of inquiries, we just glance at what they are. The amount of inquiries to get hold of CCTV is substantial anyway, and hospital and custody checks, because, not custody checks, but hospital, because you can appreciate how busy A&E staff are, and about getting those details and to establish what we require. In total, we spend 1,181 days dealing with missing persons, which is not usually in any way crime related, and a further 72 days dealing with the administration of that. Personally, I think with the rise in mental health, the rise in recognition on mental health in young and older people, this is a level of demand that will increase without a doubt. Mental health, I've already mentioned it. If you can see there, the amount of calls we get during 1 year, 9,125 relate to mental health. Over a 24-hour period, we will have 25. I'd like to think we've gone down the right route by having those 5 people in the control room. They will be of massive assistance and provide a real bridge between organisations. And again, most importantly, in addition to the reduction in demand, we provide a real service to those people who are going through crisis, unfortunately, at that time. Up to 24 hours to deal with one call, mental health, because that's what it is. And I don't know if this will, if this will strike you, but on 76 occasions dealing with a mental health individual, we had to call out a negotiator. Now, a negotiator will be a person who's off duty normally, sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, superintendent, trained on a nationally approved course. The negotiator will stun them to prevent them from harming themselves or prevent them from jumping off a bridge, taking their own life. So once every 5 days, we've had to call out a negotiator to deal with someone with mental health. Vulnerability, national to local, mentioned it earlier. Commissioner and myself for the Welsh Leads on modern-day slavery started a long time ago, the association with Gwent. I totally agree with Jeff Farrar, and I like to think in Gwent we're really at the forefront. There is more to do. UK figures 2,255 crimes. That's up 159%. It's estimated that in England and Wales, child and adult, there are up to 13,000 people trafficked or in modern slavery. 2,255, fifth of it. We've got a long way to go. We've got 6 crimes in Gwent. Does that paint the whole picture? Don't think so. 3 forces in England and Wales have got teams who deal with modern day slavery. Sometimes I'm a support of the team, sometimes they're not. I think it's the way we will have to go on this, is embed a small team to develop intelligence so public protection units can act on that. But it's something we really need to drill into. FGM, forced marriage, 0 reports in Gwent, 0 reports in Gwent. 137,100,000 women and girls affected, female genital mutilation, estimated 8 to 10,000 forced marriage. I don't think we've got 0 victims in Gwent somehow. But again, there's a need in certain areas of a community to adapt, invest, and gain that trust, not only in communities, but with certain groups as well, will tell us if we gain that trust. Domestic abuse has risen by that level. It's 1.5 rise. So what you've got is, as I mentioned earlier, 45 domestic abuse incidents throughout the county. For me, that's hard to believe. 45 incidents of domestic abuse every day going throughout Gwent. Not as simple as that, because if you probably take a Monday morning, or if you take Monday, could be 10. If you take a Saturday, Sunday, if you take tonight, I think that will reach a maximum. Again, very, very difficult. Key slide, and that's why I wanted in there. Number of vulnerable adults we'll now deal with, which will involve a background, a referral and strategy discussion, increase of 4,000 in the last year. 4,000 vulnerability. Cybercrime, huge demand for the future, and just want to speak about some unexpected consequences and successes. We invested in a police online investigation team, deals with peer-to-peer, paedophile, child sexual exploitation. Initially 4 constables, 1 detective sergeant. We turned around the case within 24 hours. I think about 95% of the people have received custodial sentences as a result of that, so very, very successful. Spin-off. An unexpected consequence of that is we now have rise in the level of sex offenders to that level, because and now, due to tagging issues which need supervision, due to eSafe that we put on people's computers so we can identify immediately if they're trying to access a level of detail which involves CSE, and due to the arms risk assessment, much more detail than we've done before, this level will rise, and these people on the high risk certainly need supervision of a very, very detailed basis. It's been mentioned before, some of the issues that will hit us in the future. I think the new road layout has been put back some time now. Just experiences, we've set up a gold group now which is managed by Rhiannon Kirk, who's the temporary ACC at the moment. She's managing the planning going forward, because the issues Lancashire Constabulary had with the fracking, bit of a different thing, but environmental protests, they were hit with a bill from mutual aid and overtime for £2.2 million within that first year. We don't want to get to that position. We want to be able to plan forward, so we're able to estimate what policing and what disruption we will have, so we can plan for that with the right level of staffing. 1st of July 2019, Celtic Manor Conference Centre is going to open. I think the first event is then. There is no doubt that will have big events as it had in the past. That will bring with it a number of hotels being filled, a number of people coming into the area. It's got a number of contractors in the area now, and road disruption as well, which will impact, I think, on the whole of Gwent. and we're planning forward to that, and it will need resourcing. Digitally, where are we looking to go? 6 key areas. Looking to invest in our digital workforce, digital collaboration across forces and with the community. And again, I think that's proved by our existence and part of SRS. And we're trying to move that forward with the Welsh Government. Digital accessibility engagement, I've already spoken to. Intervention and prevention, we've got a key role to play in that. And intelligence and investigation. This is the level of training we have to do to keep our staff fit for purpose. I'd love to say it was just a cyber course with one group of 1 attendance 1 day a year. That's probably at the bottom left. All our frontline officers cyber trained just for an awareness, because when I joined, where you had to know the definition of theft and burglary, and Mr. Guy will know, and you had to attend in a particular way and deal with that. My expectation is that when an officer, a member of staff, goes into someone's house, they know about cyberbullying, they know how to retrieve access to computers, they know how to identify areas of human trafficking, they know how to look out for CSE, they know how to look for forced marriage, and they know how to look for terrorism. Pretty complex, I think, but I'm sure we're getting there, even if they're able to identify and pass it on to someone else. Level of training there goes right up to the top, Pollet, and the drones, which we've invested in, which is a great bit of equipment, right down to the bottom, body-worn videos. And really, is that at the bottom? We want all our staff to be equipped with body-worn videos, really technical bit of kit, and really good for deterrence and prevention as well. Serious and organised crime, just to give you some very brief details. I won't give the level of detail. We've got a number of organised crime groups operating in Gwent at this particular time. I think we need to use every tactic available to tackle those people, whether that be covert and overt. We're certainly committed to doing that, and the Commission is committed to do it as well. I think Gwent is vulnerable because of the position we lie in Wales. We're the closest to Bristol, we're the closest to Manchester, to Liverpool, with all the other forces. And past experience will tell me these people will and are travelling into Gwent to engage with our vulnerabilities in the community there. Operation Jewel took part at the beginning of this year. Again, I'd like to think that's a template for Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and Public Service Board. That came right from PCSOs passing information, community, very importantly, being brave enough to pass on details. 300 police officers briefed that morning, and 25 arrests with just one phase. We've had 50. Just the element Wales Online, 13-year-old boy was one of the runners dealing drugs. That's the element we're dealing with. We will have future operations like that to tackle areas in Gwent, and we're very well supported by Tarion. Workforce wellbeing, key to the Commission and myself and all the people that we work with in ensuring we've got an engaged and skilled workforce, but one that is valued and looked after. We engage in training, supervisor training, and I think training now, which has been recognised nationally by Oscar Kilo programme, which is a national mental health programme, and mine nationally to develop and look after our staff. And I think that will really pay dividends in the future. I know Darren's going to speak about more detailed funding issues, what I see as some of the big funding issues that have and will occur in the future. We've already had £500,000 withdrawn from Tarion regionally. So if you equate that to 125,000 Gwent, really impactful, 125,000 Dyfed-Powys, 250,000 South Wales, that will go into a different area within Wales, but would really have assisted us with substance misuse and enforcement work. Police education qualification framework, £900,000 across the 2 years. Entrance through the degree route, we're planned for it. I think ourselves, South Wales, Dyfed-Powys and North Wales Police are right at the forefront of that to ensure that our officers do not get a lower standard of training than their English counterparts, and ensure we're able to benefit from policing across the UK. Pension scheme, I know Darren can speak about, and police cloud licence costs, which we have to engage in. It's a pity these couple of slides are towards the end, really, because they're really impactful to me, because this shows the amount of crimes and demand on your officers that exist across England and Wales. I would have thought Gwent was towards the bottom. We're 18th in the country per 1,000 population. So the level of volume the police officers and staff are dealing up with Gwent is 18th in England and Wales. Just down from South Wales. I worked there for 25 years, which I foolishly thought was a much, much busier counterpart. It's not. That exists. We're 18th in the country. Some of the challenges we faced since 2007 workforce-wise, and again, put a bit of a Welsh dynamic to this. David Powys over 10 years managed to reduce his staff by 0.9%, North Wales by 1.2%, South Wales by 7%, Gwent by 24.6%. That leaves us at present with David Powys Police 22,000 crimes, 1,200 officers. Gwent 43,000 crimes, 1,279 officers, so 79 more than David Powys, but 21,000 crimes more. North Wales 42.5 thousand crimes, 1,450 officers. South Wales 101,000 to 2,850 officers. Savings we've made, and I think it's fair to say that we challenged ourselves to make savings, believing that the financial issues coming from Westminster were going to be worse than they were, and that's why we achieved up to 17 and 18 49,314, which outstrips the force that is 2.5 times the size of us to our west. And the savings requirement in 2023, I think that drops out now down by 3 million to 59, so 10 million. Unavoidable pressures, pay awards, 1% this year and 1% temporary uplift, could be 2% next year. Already spoken about the estate. We need to replace airwaves with a much more secure and productive network which doesn't fall out and gives us better service across the whole of the country, emergency services network. Training is a key part of the future of policing. When I joined and when we were in policing 10 years ago, we never thought we'd deal with these threats. Human trafficking, CSE, possibly just, arising then, domestic abuse, female genital mutilation, the issues we have with diversity and terrorism. Never expected that, but there's a need to every one of our members of staff to have detailed understanding of that. And technology. I'd like to think we're at the forefront of that. And that's the summary. We have a rising crime and incident demand because we want people to report. People feel more comfortable to report certain issues. There's a change in complexity of crime. I hope I've been able to show you that, but what it involves, whereas in times gone by you may have had 1 or 2 police officers deal with an incident, you now got up to 10, 11, 12, you've got 3 or 4 organisations and agency who have to share information, bring that detail together to help a victim and tackle a very, very sophisticated perpetrator. Will do everything within their powers to get away. New technology, increased opportunities for policing, increasing levels of vulnerability, emerging demand for specialist uniform operations, surveillance, terrorist assets, undercover assets, potential risk of removal of CSO funding. I don't think that is the future at the moment, but potentially in the future could be. Need to balance focus on uniform and detective resource. I think resourcing across the country disappointing in relation to detective work. I'd probably give the wrong figures here. I think we're 22,000 people short nationally. But you'd have to ask as well, why would someone want to constantly deal with the stream of public protection issues they're having to deal with? So attracting people to these ranks, attracting people to these spheres of work is very, very difficult. And the need to look after the well-being of people working in policing. Unfortunately, it's not a matter of pride with the second. I'm sure we'll get out to that. But I think we're learning that the work certain people deal with does give them cause for anxiety. Just in summary, we've got a rise in demand, complexity of crime is increasing. I think we've got a very good workforce, we're dealing with it, and we're getting towards, I think, the right level of establishment, which we haven't been in the last couple of years, to be able to deal with that. Thank you.
Can I, slightly out of context, thank you very much for that, but just wanted to say one thing. We scrutinise and we support. And can we, in the future, when you have presentations, for officers for good deeds and that, it'd be nice if we came along, to support those, just that was something. We do get, get invitation and other things, but, it's all about support in the widest sense, yeah.
Perhaps, Chief, we could invite you and maybe others for the next passing out parade. Yeah. Oh, you've got that one. I'll withdraw that comment.
I think passing out parades, the Force Awards, and the area awards as well. That would be really nice if that could occur. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Tony, you've got a question.
I'm just wondering, it's entirely up to you, Chair. Would you rather get the full picture from the finance side as well, or it's up to you?
Today's presentation has been updated following receipt of the provisional funding settlement on Tuesday afternoon this week. Hence, we tried to backload the Joint Audit Committee in the panel so you have the most up-to-date information. Briefings I've given to the finance subgroup meeting members were based on the pre-settlement announcement, but I will share with the finance subgroup members the updated medium-term financial projections which show the provisional settlement. My presentation aims to sort of reflect the financial effect of the police and crime plan and importantly accommodate everything the Chief has just said around his presentation and the demands that are placed on policing. And the other national requirements, we always try to balance the local, the regional, the national and the policy divisions. I suppose for me, my presentation generally focuses on the variables that I take into account when setting the budget, setting the financial strategy, setting the precept. And we've already mentioned unknowns, and known knowns. So moving up to 2023, we know there's a lot of unknowns in the system. Brexit, we know there's a lot of unknowns at this point in time of what's coming over the hill, really. So without further ado, just a quick chat on governance. In terms of the process, so we have the Chief Officer team who submit the bid into the Commissioner's office for the budget requirement for the year, and not just the next financial year, but for the longevity of the financial strategy over 5 years, and they oversee the budget setting process. We as the OPCC then scrutinised the bid, and we had a very useful presentation off the Chief Constable at the end of November, where we did our challenge back around the robustness of the budget setting process, the estimates, and the important developments, service pressures, efficiencies, etc. So we give that a good bit of scrutiny. We've mentioned the Joint Audit Committee a couple of times today, and importantly, they provide the assurance on the robustness of the process. So they ensure that, or they give those charged with governance assurance that the process has been a robust approach to budgeting. Welsh Police Finance Resources Group and the Police and Crime Commissioners Treasury Societies are the professional bodies that I belong to. One's a Welsh dynamic where the 4 CFOs and the 4 Directors of Finance with Wales Audit Office and the WLGA get together on a quarterly basis. So they will scrutinise the assumptions people are putting in MTFPs, the robustness of estimates, etc. Then on a national level, the Police and Crime Commissioners Treasury Society, where the 43 CFOs meet on a quarterly basis. Again, we'll share national assumptions and national conversations. We have the PCP Finance Subgroup meeting, a forum where we can go into a bit more detail, who will provide assurance to the panel as we move towards the January meeting. You have the Police and Crime panel in front of me here, so you have the power to veto the precept increase, so that's a key level of governance. But importantly, we have the public engagement and consultation. So we're currently up for consultation around the proposed level of the precept. That opened up on the 29th of November and will conclude on the 7th of January. And that's the public test, really, around precept. We are currently consulting on 3 levels of precept, 399, 499 and 599. There are logic sat behind those increases. 399 is the bare minimum.
That's a decimal point. So
yes, 3.99. Yes, very pertinent this week. The 3.99 was based on flat cash funding because the previous CSR announcement back in 2015, the then Home Sec talked about if local commissioners maximised their precept opportunities, Coupled with the reductions in grant at that time, you would have flat cash funding. So that's what 3.99 was there at. 5.99 was designed to achieve a balanced budget by 22-23 if we maximised, so took advantage of that precept rise, took account of the efficiencies we had in the system, the planned efficiencies from 1819 to 2023, we would balance the budget then. 4.99 sat within the middle. Moving to sort of context, I generally talk of that we're a £131 million business. When you take an account of income and other specific grants, we're about a £120 million business funded by government grant and the precept. You've heard me talk about the trajectory of what our split is. So we're 83% cost of staff, so we have minimal sort of wriggle room around the non-pay elements. So predominantly our efficiency schemes over the years have been driven through changes in workforce. Back in 10-11, we were 70% funded by government grant and 30% funded by precept. The preceding point in 17-18, that would be 59% and 41%. So 59% by government grant and 41% precept. So that trajectory, government grant going down, precept going up. I've talked around the CSR, around flat cash, so there's an underlying understanding at the national level that Commissioners maximise precept to maintain even flat cash funding, so we're not even supporting investment, inflation, pay awards. All those growth areas need to be accommodated predominantly through the efficiency scheme programme. And the Chief has just eloquently outlined we're in a changing world. So the conventional areas of detection and criminality, they're moving into more complex and more broader elements of investigation and protecting the vulnerable in society. I'm then going to kick off on funding. Up to 17-18, we'd had 27% cash cuts in funding. There's a graph later on that brings that to light. But when you roll in the effect of inflation, it's been a 40% real cut in Gwent policing budgets since the outset of austerity in 10-11. Government grant, in 18-19, we were expecting a 2% cut, which would continue the trend over the last 8 years where government grant has been cut. The provisional announcement on Tuesday suggested a 0% grant. So basically we'll have the same amount in 18-19 as we would in 17-18. So no account for inflation or pay award, because there's an expectation that pay awards will click up to the 2% moving forward. So we need to find that internally. It's not from additional grant. They've given indications that a 1920 grant would also stake flat cash, so a 0% cut. But there's a caveat that that would only be subject to continuing efficiency and productivity gains by forces. So if we don't continue to deliver, there may actually be a cut thereon. We forecast 2% cuts thereafter, because again, it's a bit of a still significant uncertainty when we talk about some of the unknowns later on. Brexit is a key one, what that kind of bill would look like. The last finance subgroup meeting, we had with previous figures on that. The Commissioner has already talked about the potential £6 million cut in the funding formula. So not only has our total policing pie been getting smaller year on year, although for this year it's the same size pie as last year, there's a significant issue that our slice of the pie could be £6 million less because of changes to the way that allocation is divvied up across policing. The funding formula has been on the agenda for a number of years. Significant work was done back in 15-16 and 16-17, but snap general election, Brexit, etc., it's been pushed and clicked on to potentially impacting during the next CSR, which we think will be 2020-21. Importantly, as part of austerity, we've talked about revenue grants being cut, but our capital grant has been cut significantly as well. So the capital grant as of this year is 60% less than it was three years ago. So for context, we get about £450,000 a year for capital grant. Our fleet replacement programme alone is 1.5 million. So we don't even have enough capital grant to replace a third of our fleet, our operational fleet, every year. So the only other place you then go and seek out that money, reserves, which there's a slide later on that shows how they're being reduced over the funding period. We can go to revenue, but the revenue account is being depleted. You can go to borrowing, but that comes with a cost, or capital receipts, which are minimal. I've talked about the precept increase scenarios at 3.99, 4.9 and 5.99, and I've explained the logic. And in terms of relative amounts, a 3.99% increase on precept is 18 pence per week on an average Band D property. The 4.99 is 22 pence, and the 5.99 is 26 pence per week on an average Band D property. And we're still expecting the precept tax base to increase by about 1% per annum, which is what we built in previously. As you appreciate, the more houses that are built, the more you can levy there's a greater base to levy the council tax. In terms of expenditure, the Chief has already mentioned 1,279 officers, because you've been acutely aware that for the 16-17 and 17-18 financial year, there would have, at the conclusion of this financial year, 320 new police officers into Gwent, because we've been able to identify efficiencies. You know, we've had accelerated efficiencies, but we've been able to drive those efficiencies into investing into more officers to tackle the emergent demand. We're budgeting for 131 PCSOs, which is consistent with previous years, 647 staff. The 18-19 budgets have been fully rebased at this point in time. So we've accelerated the budget setting process to this side of Christmas in order to have an absolute lockdown budget before we click into the new year. 2% pay awards. So I think part of the conversation that the police and fire minister gave us around only giving us flat cash funding and not cutting it was that local commissioners of force would have to fund the 2% pay award. So that was the sort of quid pro quo in there. So we are building a 2% pay award in. We've got incremental drift around as officers move through the salary bandings, because we've had a significant amount of probationers in over the recent years. So there's acceleration through those scale points. There's pressure on the pension, the local government pension scheme. The recent actuarial valuation has shown that the pension rates will go up over the forthcoming years. So that's £2 million already at the pot. So we've got a flat cash funding, yet £2 million has just appeared through unavoidable cost, really. In terms of inflation, it's been peaking at about 3% over the last year. We've budgeted for 2% to try to risk manage that. But we have, again, put in 5% for utility, and that's about £500,000 of inflation coming through the system. Then we're into pressure. The Chief has talked about the police education qualification framework and the double whammy, that not only do we pay into the levy, into national government, that then doesn't come through into Wales, we then still need to pay for the training of those officers. So the levy itself is the best part of 400,000, and then we could be looking at another £500,000 then to train those officers again. We've talked about investment in ICT and cloud licenses, and this is all about the National Enabling Programme to ensure that we can maximise that storage capacity and utilise the most advanced technology in terms of our provision there. We've talked about Project Fusion, and that's our programme of work with South Wales Police, and that's about rationalising, standardising, integrating and mobilising our ICT assets across the two organisations so we can maximise the use of modern technology. And that's an investment there around staffing to ensure that we have the resources to deliver that programme. There's CapEx of about 44.5 million over the next 5 years. It's state strategy, ICT strategies, fleet replacement programme, etc., etc. Other long-term projects are not necessarily of capital nature, but we need to fund, and that's, again, a further 4.6 million to keep us just ahead of the curve, to tackle the vulnerability, tackle the criminality, and tackle the demands we're facing. The reserves and committed funds essentially will be fully utilised by 1920. And that's, again, to deliver the programme. And unfortunately, Colin's had to leave, but I will touch on the PFI programme at that point. So we are sort of forecast borrowing about 24.6 million, which does have a revenue tail, as you can appreciate. We're borrowing at about 2.75% potentially on that sort of sum of money. So I suppose the thing for me is, let's get ahead of the curve before the interest rates go up again. Let's touch on efficiencies. It's another key variable. Chief has already mentioned £49.3 million of efficiency savings delivered over the last 9 years through the Staying Ahead, the very successful Staying Ahead programme, of which we're now in phase 8. But we still have a remaining recurrent deficit of 10.9 million by 22-23. If you wind through, and that's based on a 3.99% precept rise. if you wind through the efficiencies that are currently there of 6.3 with about a 4.5 million gap. HMIC undertake the value for money profiles which were scrutinised at the Joint Audit Committee yesterday, and they've identified that Gwent are £5.8 million more costing Gwent per head of population, that's an important facet, than the average of its peers. It doesn't give you the answers, the value for money profiles, it just raises questions. There are likely, very highly likely, very probable reasons why we want to be more expensive in a particular area, because that's reflecting local demands, and there's also inconsistency of reporting where local policing lies in the model across forces. So it certainly doesn't give us the answer, but it gives us some opportunity to shine a light on those areas to shape our future savings programme going forward. And in terms of our indicative savings programme moving forward, we've got about 6.3 million plan of savings in the pipeline, 18-19 onwards, but we're doing a significant amount of work now in January, understaying the Head 8 programme with the VFM profiles to rationalise them, to see what the timing is, see what the sufficiency is, see what the robustness is. And as I've already said, at a 3.99% precept, based on the provisional settlement, we're still facing a £4.5 million recurrent deficit in 22-23 after taking account of known efficiencies. Quick touch on the economy. In the autumn budget, the autumn statement by the Chancellor, GDP growth down from 2% to 1.5%. What does that look like at the macro UK PLC level? Inflation forecast is set to reduce to about 2% in 2020, so that's good news. Uncertainty of Brexit, 700 million has already been spent. He put 3 billion aside at the budget, and we are still talking about a £40 billion divorce bill with the EU. How's that going to play out in public finances? We don't know. But at least we have stability of employment at about 4.5%, so significant lower unemployment as seen since over many a year. Quickly on external influences, we always take these into account. We've talked about emerging demand in the Chief's presentation. There's public expectations, because if grant funding continues to reduce and precept funding continues to increase, by the next decade, the public of Gwent will be the majority shareholders in policing in Gwent in terms of from a funding perspective. The Chief has brought to light very well for me around the visibility of the safeguarding work that's undertaken. There's significant amount of work, complex and detailed work that's undertaken that the public may not necessarily be fully sighted on. There's significant local demands that you've got to balance against regional and national demands. You think about some of the terrorist threat, the way it plays out into the streets of Gwent, and the way Gwent officers need to go up to London, etc., to help with that investigation. Austerity, one of the key factors is partners retrenching. One of the ways out of austerity is collaboration, doing things once, doing it better together. But some of the knee-jerk reactions into austerity is to retrench, so we need to break that kind of mindset and culture. We always look at the Gwent public finances, what pressures are faced by local authorities, and similarly we look at from a Welsh dynamic what's policing in Wales looking, so how do we benchmark against their costs, funding, etc., and even with fire and rescue as a precept and authority, how are they playing out their demand into funding. Quick touch on risks and opportunities. I've talked about Brexit. The HMIC efficiency review was kicked off 15-16, I think, to deliver about 3.5 billion of efficiencies by 1920. In the autumn, the Chancellor confirmed that they were going to relax the pressure on that a bit, and they'd only have to find 2.4 billion, not 3.5, so that's good news, isn't it? Potential comprehensive spending review, because they're regular reviews at the departmental level. What's the next one for the Home Office going to shape out like? Funding formula I've talked about. Home Office reallocations. When the whole policing pot is passed to the Home Office, that's not necessarily what reaches commissioners. The Home Office have the ability to reallocate amounts, we used to call it top slicing in the old days, off to other areas of the policing family, HMIC, IPCC, and international programmes. For the 18-19 financial year, £945 million is reallocated out to other areas that then doesn't hit commissioners. In simple terms, that's 9 million of Gwent money that doesn't actually get through to us. We're about 1% of any national figure. I've talked about capital financing for the capital programme. I've talked about sustainability of efficiencies moving forward with 49.3 under the belt and another 10 to go. We need to be mindful of how sustainable they are. There's opportunities around income generation. I just wish Newport County would get to the Premiership so we could do that, get a good income stream around policing some big Premier League teams. And I've seen that as a Cardiff City fan, so I'm playing off personal and private and sort of public face there. Legislative changes, we were talking about the general power of competence for commissioners to, like local authorities, hold around income generation opportunities. That's probably the back burner with Brexit coming down the road. And commissioning, we've done significant work around commissioning. You think about the Victims Help Connect Gwent, significant opportunities commission with partners. Performance. 17-18 forecast outturn is currently £5 million, but the important facet is that is already recurrently committed from 18-19 onwards when we hit the full establishment. You would have heard me talk 2 years ago when the government stance on government grants changed post the Paris attacks. We were facing 7% cuts, and we ended up with less than a 1% cut. We had to turn that oil tanker around recruitment. 320 new police officers since that point in time. We're turning around that oil tanker. By 31st of March this year, next year, this financial year, we will hit full establishment. So that variance is being about profiling of police officers. So that precept we put up last year has been fully committed now on new police officers, because you appreciate the precept we have all year. The recruitment takes time, especially when you're talking a significant number of officers. And performance, the Chief has talked about the Peel assessments, HMIC, 3 years of good assessments. I'm just going to touch now on some of the graphs really that I aim to try to bring to light the financial picture. So the first slide aims to highlight the shift in our funding sources. The top line shows the reduction in government grant over the years. You'll see there's about 8 years of cuts. Then we flatline for a bit, and then we're looking to reflect the reduction in the funding formula, the £6 million. So you can see the way that the graph shoots down. You'll see underneath then the precept graph. So it gets to a point, because we've known the precepts up to 18, 19, and then you can see the four colours fan out, dependent on what precept increase is ultimately considered and endorsed. So the green line being a 5.99, precept red 499, purple 399, and the blue kind of 0%, just to show you the impact of what a zero precept rise would give you. The zero line still goes up because the base is still increasing, just for clarity there. So we do get a marginal gain every year by the base. The next slide brings together, I suppose, three things. It tries to show the balance between overall funding, expenditure and efficiency. So that top red line aims to articulate what would have happened with expenditure if we did nothing on efficiency schemes. We left expenditure go unchecked since 8-9, what would it grow by? So it's about 105 million in 18-19 up to 184 million. So it's 18 million's worth of growth over 10 years if we'd done nothing. The lower line shows how funding has changed over those years. And that funding line is a combination of grant and precept. So in essence, we've had flat funding for 10 years, yet expenditure has grown by £80 million. The way we've closed that gap is through staying ahead, 49 million. So if I drew this graph again, halfway along, in line with the 17-18 year, those two lines converge. They come together because we have delivered £49 million of the savings, so the expenditure line hasn't gone up unchecked. So they come together. The next line shows the effect of those coming together. So you can see there's one continual line to start off with, because funding did equal expenditure, because I have a statutory duty to balance the books every year, so I can't leave it go on. Then the fantail looks like sort of bared wires coming out, shows the deficits that appear after precept increases, but before any further efficiency schemes. So if we deliver no schemes from 18-19 onwards, that's what the kind of gaps would look like. So the top red line is the expenditure line, 135 million. The green line, if we put precept up by 5.99%, we'd still have a £4.5 million gap. The red line, which is the 4.99% precept option, we still have a £7.8 million gap. The purple line, which is the 3.99% option, gives us a £10.8 million gap, and the 0% gives us sort of £22 million gap. But the importance of that slide is that's before we weave in any future saving schemes that we have plans for, that we're going to nail down. Certainly just after Christmas, we've got a lot of plans in place. We'll prioritise and run through them. If I wind those through, that's the next slide. So you'll see if I deliver, or we deliver a further £9.3 million of efficiency schemes, then that red line drops below the 5.99% precept option. So we're left with a little bit of a surplus. But all the other three precept scenarios, 4.99, 3.99 and 0, still sit below the expenditure. So they still leave a deficit by 22-23 if we still deliver £9.3 million of efficiency savings. The last two slides, the next one just tries to bring to light the capital programme spend for next year. So you can see the largest element will be delivering the estate strategy and the HQ bill predominantly. Then there's an element in for fleet, ICT, other bits of capital, and then you have that hashed chunk, which is the non-capital funded long-term projects. And again, I will share the detail underlying these slides with the 4 members of the Finance Subcommittee, and then there's an open door into me after Christmas, before the precept meeting on the 26th, to go through them in great detail and depth to get a full understanding of the impact. And then the final slide shows the way our reserves and committed funds are utilised between now and 22-23. So at 2017-18, I've kind of got 6 categories of reserves. I have the general reserve, a legal duty, that's our reserve to fund working capital, and it's the chief's operational reserve to fund in the short term and the immediacy critical events. We have future budgetary imbalances reserve, which is set aside just in case in one particular year the recurrent efficiency savings are insufficient to balance the budget legally. The large green reserve is the future PFI commitments. That is set aside to fund the PFI custody and inspector station as part of the funding model when Welsh Government credits drop off in about 10 years' time, because the scheme goes off another 20 years, so we need to set aside funding to pay for the last 10 years of that scheme. Over the last probably 2 to 3 years, we've been doing significant work in looking at voluntary termination, voluntary options around buying out that scheme. And we're currently well advancing conversations around delivering value for money by a voluntary termination of that scheme, releasing revenue resources, releasing a huge element of that reserve to then put back into the other aspects of the estate programme. So that's a significant piece of value for money work that we're going to hopefully bring to conclusion next financial year. You'll see the purple reserve, which is the capital programme, and how that is depleted very quickly over the next couple of years, and then we're into the borrowing element. And then I set aside some sums for commissioning strategy, police service initiatives. You'll appreciate the Stay Ahead 8 programme, and the commissioning strategies may need pump priming to get initiatives off the ground. So there's some smaller reserves for that. And there's the final reserve is other financial liabilities, and that's around provisions, ombudsman cases, legal cases, etc., that we need to set aside. That's the finance input. Thank you. Happy to take questions alongside the Chief.
Colin Mann had to leave, and the PFI, I'm not sure, did you cover the question that... I assume he's concerned to the future and everything, is he really?
Yes.
Well, anyway, you're going to...
Yeah,
okay.
I'll speak to Colin, yeah.
Thank you. I think my question pales into insignificance. It's really to do with with your project plans, where you're no longer having road patrols on motorways and not what. Where will that fit into your budget strategy? As I say, my question most probably pales insignificance in the whole of that scheme, but it's just to do with vehicles, manning, and things like that.
No, as we haven't got a loads policing unit at the moment. We've got area support units which operate across every shift. They take on the specialist policing function, which will be roads policing, search, public order. They do a tremendous job. We're looking at possible collaborative opportunities across the 3 Southern Wales forces and North Wales as well, and that would be part of the plan going forward. But definitely roads policing is a key aspect of what we do. Road safety, deterrent, I know we've spoken about earlier, mini police. We look at community speed watch as well, a whole host of issues. But it's a key part of what Gwent has always done. And you'll see quite a lot on Twitter now about the road policing initiatives. They're always involved in the European-wide campaigns, seatbelts, breath tests now, for example. So it is a key part moving forward and a key element of public safety, yes.
Those 90 officers have gone elsewhere, I take it, within the organisation.
Sorry?
The 90 officers, which I understood was the figure, have gone elsewhere into the organisation.
Roads policing units now would have been rationalised throughout the organisation. We've got area support units now, which work east and west on the 5 different teams, and yes, they would have gone elsewhere.
Both presentations today, I have to say that you have slightly better dress sense than the Cardiff City chairman. I'm glad to see that anyway. Okay. You spoke to us, Chief, about the future and what policing looks like today. As we travel through Gwent, in the role that I have, people often tell me what you don't do. And given the fact that we've got the decriminalisation of parking, what you're going to do less, and the perception that the public have might be slightly Dixon of Dock Green, but they're really seeing throughout Gwent, you're actually producing less and now wanting more. Now, that sounds as if it's a negative thing, because that is actually based upon not knowing where you were going. You have a major perception with regards to PR. We don't communicate in simple enough terms as to what shape modern policing today is taking. I'm privileged to be able to sit here and listen. I have to take this away, and there's absolutely no way I can reproduce the statements and the enthusiasm that you have for policing here. But you need to convince the people that policing isn't going backwards, it's actually going forward. We may need to look at how we police local areas in a different way. There may have to be different ways of doing the Dixon of Dock Green style stuff. As far as the pay rise of 2%, if we've put 2% away, you've just given them 2% pay rise. You see what I'm saying? So we're committed to the 2%. If we put it away, negotiations would tell me I'm going to come in for 4, but I know I'm going to come out with 2 because you've got 2%. Where am I going with this? It's just for us to really deliver a police force fit for the future, we're going to have to get the grips with the budget. But we have to have the support of those that we represent behind us. And to get that, they have to have an understanding of what modern policing is like. You haven't got long, but you need to start concentrating on telling them what you do, because they're very quick to tell you what you don't do.
If I could say, yeah, you are absolutely right. Our communications unit, in both the Gwent Police and my office, we have our communications unit. We do need to step up our game. There's no doubt about that. We live in the information age, and people expect information. Those who take an interest, and the numbers who take an interest is increasing. There's no doubt about that. But it's something, whether you could say it's a culture change, but it's something we certainly need to address to get the message out there about the environment in which we're living in. Key issues about partnership working. I think we'll stress the point that our financial projections are not based on the assumption that Newport County will get to the Premier League, not for the next 5 or 6 years at any rate. And we need to let people know in an honest way what those pressures are, the hard choices that we have to make, I'm a politician, and there's always a temptation for a politician to do what could be deemed to be popular. I've never worked that way. I will do what I believe to be right, even if it's perceived as unpopular, if I think the case is strong. But that my case is eased considerably if we've gone that extra mile and explained the issues to the thinking public. And that's something that we have to take on board.
Can I have a couple of points? And I know Pam wants to say a couple of things as well. Yeah, it do really take your point, of course I do. We went through a review of our corporate communications team, who I personally think are really, really good. And we're trying to redress that balance now in relation to the times they work and what they actually do, because they're a great group of people. And again, the Commissioner, we all work together on the communication. I see what comes out. I think it's a difficult balance with communication, really. If I go back to what you saw in relation to serious and organised crime, I know when I see, being a police officer, when I see stuff on the news, sometimes it worries me a bit, especially about serious crime and terrorism. And if we were to really tell everyone what we were doing, it would not be a nice story. It just isn't, unfortunately, because that's the nature of what we do. But I realise there is a balance, and in celebrating some of the success of what we do, we've got to really temper that with putting people under greater fear, because I know it does impact on people as well. I think social media-wise, I certainly think we're right up there. In Wales, I think we got. I mentioned on, I think it was, one of the first slides, really, slide 3 or 4, 193,000 social media actions per day. We do it, and I think we could. I challenge anyone of force our size to be able to do that. And again, if I could, I just urge you again to look at slide 20. That's what our officers do deal with. They're the 18th per 1,000 population busiest in the country. That is a fact. And that's what I totally understand what Darren says about the HMIC value for money profiles. They don't paint the true picture in relation to specialist capabilities and in a small first command team sort of levels. Although I know myself, we've got 7 superintendents, 3 chief superintendents, the lowest level in the country, I would say, for a force our size, which does worry me on occasions about their resilience, because they're good people. So point is definitely taking communication, and it's how we achieve that balance. And again, I think all of our 2,000 staff are corporate communications people. If one of them, as sometimes unfortunately guest says, I'm immensely busy tonight, there's no one covering your area, that tends to go out to 100 people rather than what appears on someone else that is, pre-planned, etc. So every one of us are corporate communications people, and it's just getting people who have the confidence to say the right thing. But comments are very noted. Thank you.
Having me here at the meeting, my first meeting as Deputy Chief Constable of Gwent, having recently been promoted, and listening very carefully to what you've said and your views is actually really important at this early stage of my appointment. My role is looking at service improvement, managing change, looking at efficiency savings, obviously operational governance, but also communication with the public. And I think, in all honesty, we are very reactive in terms of our communications with the public. And we're at a bit of a crossroads because policing has changed so much over recent years. I'm the Welsh lead for cybercrime. And when you look at the demand that we have through the cyber route, it's actually, at times, about 30% of our overall crime. So how we balance some of our communication so in our traditional way as well with social media is a real challenge for us, because I certainly see cyber as our hidden streets. They're the streets that the people are on all the time, and of course just as we need to be visible on our physical streets, we as a police service need to be visible on our virtual streets as well. But I think this is a crossroads, if you like, for Gwent, because policing has changed so much, but our communication is very much in the same vein. So certainly over the next 12 to 18 months, working with the OPCC, my role is very much about perhaps not just communicating what we're doing, but why we're doing it. Why is it that we sometimes have to change? Why is it that we sometimes won't be able to do some things because we need to look at threat and risk and be able to deliver against some of that? So certainly as we come along to some of these meetings in the future, and as certainly I get to know you, I would really want to get that feedback from you about, is our comms right? Is it proactive as well as being reactive? We've hidden behind not wanting to tell people things because we haven't wanted there to be a tipping point around public reassurance. I think we've got to put that aside now. We need to educate the people in terms of what's happening in their community so that they can actually tell us the information and intelligence that we need. And we can only do that through your help and through the way in which we communicate honestly and openly with people in the future.
Can I just make an observation in that, you know, the communication, which you've obviously said, and of course you get situations where the man in the street has his rant about all sorts of things, but you've got to shelter him in all sorts of ways, haven't you, really? That's the realities of it. But I think every organisation in the public sector, they're all learning that they've got to communicate and tell people what they're doing, because the general people, they're only interested in what's directly affecting them most of the time. I just want to ask anyone want to ask a question, anything on that? Because there's one question I want to ask of Darren, really. We got Brexit, you know, on which nobody really knows how it's, well, some people say they know what's going to happen, but I'm just wondering, the risk situation to you is the same it is to any organisation. Have you got all that sort of covered, really?
Yeah.
I think Theresa May would like to know if that's the case.
Yeah. We have some reserves. No. Again, we just manage, as a national PACS body, we've always got a key now. We do have a route into Home Office, but it's one of those known unknowns. It's happening. There's 3.7 billion already committed. There's a 40 billion estimated price tag with that divorce settlement. Where's that money going to come from? It's going to impact somewhere along public service. We'll just wait and see. But as the Commissioner says, you know, we plan for the sort of worst and hope for the best, really. So, yeah.
I wonder if I could just say, Chair, what you've heard today is obviously our projections based on the provisional settlement that we've had. We won't know for certain what it'll be until later in January, but before our next meeting. I think that's right. 26. Probably won't be dramatically different from what we have now, but there could be changes. You know, we're trying to be cautious. What we need to do now, we are consulting already with the public. That's begun in terms of the options as we see it, from 3.99 to 5.99. Note my use of the decimal point. We'll be coming back to you then at our January meeting with our firm view on that. But what we wanted to do today is to give you a clear indication of the issues that we face and our thinking in what I hope has been an open and transparent way.
Can I say yes, very, very professional, and you know, you sort of pulled all the stops out. You know, there's no hiding. You told us all, you know, all the commitments and everything. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely. If we now move on to the forward work programme, 71 to 72.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to highlight to members, as we said, the next meeting is the 26th of January. Already on the work programme, we have the Treasury Management Strategy, we have the Treasury Management 6-month update and the budget precept. We've also talked at the previous meeting regarding having the engagement strategy come into the January meeting and the performance report come into the January meeting. We've quite a full agenda. In March, we also have planned the wellbeing strategy, which will include information on the sickness as well and wellbeing of officers. So if members are happy to endorse that. We also had a previous request for cybercrime come in. We haven't got a date for that, but I'll speak to the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner and we'll come up with a suitable date for that. So if members are happy to endorse that, that will be the work programme for going forward.
Were you happy with that? Yep. Can I, just before we conclude, can I wish everyone a Merry Christmas? Hope 2018 is what we all want. I don't know about you, but I never seem to get any Christmas presents. I got six grandchildren, and I got Newport County. That's where my resources go.
Mr. Chairman, could we give you some work to do? The mini police force, I think, has been a credit to all those, and I think it would be amiss of us as a committee, as the Police and Crime Committee, not to have the chairman on our behalf write to them and personally thank each one an individual, thank them for their efforts, and express to them how much we actually appreciate what the work that they are doing for us. And I think if I could move that, Chairman.
Splendid idea. If you give us all the information, which you can do, as to the identities. It's
by hand.
It's not our intention to make it a rule that all police officers must be aged between 9 and 11. We don't want to give that impression.
Yeah. Can I say, as Bill comes along with all sorts of ideas, which are, he talks a lot of sense, and can I say now that the panel is concluded? Thank you very much, and safe journey.